following announcement to show compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, known as Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of New Jersey, 1975. Notice of this meeting was given by adopting the annual schedule of the location, time and date, sending copies to the Home News Tribune and the Star Ledger, posting in Borough Hall, and filing a copy with the Borough Clerk within 7 days following the annual organizational meeting is filed. Sharon, can we have roll call, please?
Mr. Bourne?
Here.
Mrs. Bush? Here. Mrs. Clarkson? Here. Mr. Grossman?
Here.
Mr. Jensen? Mr. Leidry?
Here.
Mayor Bahala?
Here.
Councilman Wallace?
Here.
Mr. Hirsch?
Here.
Mr. Curran?
Here.
Mr. Erickson?
Here. Declare quorum present. Again, just a couple brief announcements, some of which you've heard if you were with us yesterday, so I apologize for the repetition. We will introduce no new testimony after 11 p.m. If all the planning board members could remember to have their microphones down so that everyone in the public can hear them speak, and everyone who's watching us remotely online as well can hear us speak. In breaking with typical tradition, we're going to ask questions of the witnesses one at a time as opposed to at the end, so we'll take that individually. And I've been asked by the people who are running our audiovisual presentation that any of the professionals and the applicant who might have mobile phones, if they could perhaps power them off, because we had some interference yesterday during the presentation. So if anybody's got a mobile phone, anybody in the planning board who has a mobile phone or a mobile device, if you could power it down now, it would be greatly appreciated. Okay. First resolution this evening is DaVita Healthcare Partners, a major site plan with bulk variances. We've all had our time to review it. Chair will entertain a motion.
I move the resolution with all of the amendments that we had.
I second.
We have a second. Sharon, can we have a voice vote, please?
Mr. Bourne?
Yes.
Mrs. Clarkson?
Yes.
Mr. Leidry?
Aye.
Mayor Bahala?
Aye.
Councilman Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Erickson?
Yes. Good, the resolution is adopted. The next resolution this evening is from Bren Realty, who needs additional time to complete conditions of approval. Same story, everyone's had time to review it. Chair will entertain a motion.
I move that resolution.
Second.
Sharon, can we have a voice vote, please?
Mr. Bourne?
Yes.
Mrs. Clarkson?
Yes.
Mr. Leidry?
Aye.
Mayor Valhalla?
Aye.
Councilman Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Erickson?
Yes. Resolution is adopted. Okay, moving on to our old business, I guess it's 1 day old. Woodmont Metuchen, if the applicant would like to pick up where we left off yesterday.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. For the record, Jennifer Mazaway. I'm a partner with the firm of Genova Burns, Giantomasi Webster in Newark, New Jersey. And I'm here again this evening to present our application for preliminary and final subdivision, as well as preliminary and final site plan approval for the development at Pearl Street and New Street in downtown Metuchen. Last evening, the board heard a lot of testimony. They heard from Stephen Santola, Executive Vice President, General Counsel for Woodmont Properties, also from Keith Campbell, Project Architect from RTKL, Anthony Castillo from SESI, our Site Engineer, Tom Carmen from Melillo and Bauer, Landscape Architect, as well as Todd Helmer from Tim Haas and Associates, he's the parking garage designer, and Dante Germano and Mike Siselka from Nexus regarding the proposed parking garage operations. This evening, we'd like to present to the board our traffic engineer, Carl Penke, as well as our planner and fiscal expert, Cray Rainkamp, and hopefully conclude our presentation this evening to the board. And so, unless there are questions, I'll call my first witness, which is Carl Penke.
Please proceed. We can swear you in, Mr. Penke?
Yeah, that'll do it. Sure.
You swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give in this proceeding shall be the truth and nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
And state your full name for the record, please.
Yes, for the record, my name is Carl with a K, Alan Penke, P as in Peter, E-H-N-K-E.
Mr. Penke, can you give the board the benefit of qualifications?
Sure. I am a registered professional engineer in the state of New Jersey, as well as several other states. I'm vice president with Langen Engineering. My area of expertise is civil engineering, particularly traffic engineering, which I've been practicing for over 28 years. I regularly appear before planning bodies throughout the state of New Jersey, as well as in superior courts, and have qualified as a traffic engineer.
Board will accept Mr. Pinckey as an expert.
Thank you.
Mr. Pinckey, have you had an opportunity to review the proposal for development here?
I have.
And have you reviewed the traffic considerations related to that proposed development?
I have. The applicant did request that I review the plan and the application, provide feedback and input, particularly to ensure that access and safety would properly work on this particular project.
Can you share with the board the benefit of your findings?
Certainly. In preparing my evaluation of the project and the property, of course, I visited the site environs. I am familiar with Metuchen, having traveled through this area many times and done projects throughout the state of New Jersey. I had the opportunity to reach out to the Department of Transportation to obtain relevant traffic volume data on the adjacent roadways, to obtain information from them on past and ongoing construction projects in the area, as well as information on the operation of their traffic signals in the area. I had the opportunity to review in detail the 2009 Borough Traffic Circulation Plan that was prepared by McCormick Taylor, which was quite in-depth and very informative and useful in my evaluation of this property. Finally, we did endeavor to sample traffic volumes on the adjacent roadways in 2014 while schools were still open, to cross-check the 2008-2009 data by McCormick Taylor, so I was comfortable that their information was still valid and useful for my evaluation of this particular project. A couple of things. The borough has been the recipient of some large investment by the Department of Transportation, as I'm sure you guys have all been suffering through and aware of over the last couple of years. The department has upgraded the traffic signal at Main Street and Route 27 to add turn hours to help improve the traffic flow at that particular location. And then more particularly, they're winding down on construction of the bridge over the Middlesex Greenway, which has with it improvements at both ends of the bridge. The Amboy Avenue intersection is being completely upgraded with a new traffic signal, and they've been installing a traffic signal at the south side of the bridge at Lake Avenue and Route 27. Based upon my review of what they are doing at that location and the McCormick Taylor report, I think you'll find at the end of the day, when the traffic control is gone, that there will be an improvement in traffic flow in that area as a result. So I think there's some good investments going on that will be beneficial to traffic in the area. With regard to this particular project, it is a transit-oriented development. I've had the opportunity to be involved with quite a few transit-oriented developments in the state of New Jersey. Morristown's, Hamilton Station, Westmont Station up in Woodridge, which is a very large TOD where we're actually building a new train station, Amboy Station, and so forth, Aberdeen train station. So I've had quite a bit of time to become familiar with the characteristics of transit-oriented developments and the benefits of TODs. And certainly New Jersey Transit has published in the past information on the benefits of transit-oriented developments and have been encouraging of these types of projects, mostly because of the ability to properly place residential in close proximity to major mass transit infrastructure to reduce the reliance on the vehicle. In this particular case, we have two benefits occurring here. The transit-oriented development in this particular instance is being constructed in very close proximity to a significant train station that provides regional access to places of employment, particularly in New York City. And the development is also very close to the CBD. So there's a double benefit in this particular aspect. What that does is it provides the ability for the residents of the the new residential development to select to live here so that they can take advantage of the train to places of employment without having to rely on their vehicle. And then in their off hours, when they return, they also have the benefit of being able to walk quite easily to your downtown CBD area and avail themselves of the entertainment, food, and retail opportunities that the Main Street does provide. In addition, there is a retail component added to this site which enhances that particular opportunity. So that's all great benefits that are inherent to a well-designed TOD and a well-placed TOD. And in this particular instance, I think this project really falls in what I would qualify as being a very superior location for transit-oriented development. The site that's proposed is a very active site today. It is a roughly 660 space commuter lot that does take in quite a bit of traffic in the morning and exit that traffic in the evening. So it is an active site from that standpoint, and will continue to be so. In evaluating the project from a traffic perspective, one of the things I wanted to look at and be able to report to the applicant is that we were comfortable that the access points and immediate surrounding roadway on the site, adjacent to the site, will handle the flow of the existing traffic and whatever additional traffic is generated associated with the residential development and the retail development on this site. So as I said, I did have the opportunity to evaluate the McCormick-Taylor traffic volume data. We also did some traffic counts along New Street, immediately adjacent to the site, to verify that data, to check the intersection of Center Street and Pearl Street, which are our primary access points, and utilize that data to prepare some actual analysis to ensure that things would operate well. So we did do that. The data that we gathered in 2014 showed very similar patterns to what McCormick-Taylor reported in their report back in 2008, 2009. Patterns really haven't changed much. Probably the only thing I noticed was that through traffic along 27 or Lake Street and along Main Street actually was a little lighter in 2014 than 2008. Because I was interested in trying to understand that, I was able to obtain some 2010 data from DOT, which also saw the types of patterns that I was seeing, a little bit lighter. So I think McCormick-Taylor may have had a sample of traffic that might have been unique and a little higher in their analysis. So I was comfortable in the end of the day that we had a good snapshot of what was happening on the roadways, and that the database that we had between McCormick-Taylor's and our updated data really gave me a good picture of what's happening along New Street, along Main Street, and along Lake Avenue. With that data, we did some projections forward a few years to a projected 2018 when we would anticipate the facility to be online, and prepared traffic projections for the site. For purposes of my analysis, I did a rather conservative projection. I did not adjust for or reduce any traffic that's currently coming to and from the parking lot, which we anticipate there will be some displacement as a result of the change in the parking provisions on this particular site. And then I prepared estimates of traffic associated with development of the site based upon data published by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, which is a professional organization, a national organization that has accumulated a good database source as to how to project traffic for these types of development. Generally, that database is for suburban locations, cornfield locations, and not urban locations. So it's conservative in and of itself in its projections. I did adjust that data a little bit to reflect the TOD nature of the site. We know from data published by New Jersey Department of New Jersey Transit that we can expect reductions in traffic from a project like this of upwards of 30% as compared to if you took this project and put it out in Hunterdon County or put it out away from easy access to a CBD and a train station. That said, I like to take a hard look at things, so I did about a 15% adjustment rather than being aggressive with it, so that I was taking a worst-case look at our access locations. I'm sure you've all heard traffic engineers testify before you. We have techniques to model the roadway system. They're computer-based, and they create a modeling of the operation of the roadway based upon the traffic control, whether it's a traffic signal or a stop sign or a yield sign. So we were able to plug the numbers that I projected into those analysis and check Center Street at Woodmont Drive, Pearl Street, and I also checked Lake and Main Street. And basically what we found is that the driveway connection, Woodmont Way and Pearl Street, those intersections will continue to operate at good levels of service. Traffic flow along New Street will basically be unimpeded, really high levels of service A, which you don't get much better than that. It's free flow. And the side streets will be at little lower levels of service because you do have to stop at stop signs and wait for a gap. But again, they were operating at good levels of service. So I'm comfortable that this proposed project will have safe access into and out of the site based upon those projections. There was a question last night, and I think the Mesa report raises a question about Lake Avenue, Route 27, and New Street, the traffic signal at that location, whether any traffic signal timing adjustments might be needed at that particular location. We did have, as I say, the ability to get from the department the actual timing program that's in place at that traffic signal. The signal is a actuated traffic signal, which means it's traffic responsive. It is set up on a 90-second cycle length, and it's coordinated along the corridor. And basically, the side street approach of New Street is the actuated approach, which responds to traffic. And it's timed from a minimum of 7 seconds. If there's one car there, it'll run for 7 seconds, and it'll turn off up to 24 seconds. So it is traffic responsive, and based upon our analysis, it'll easily adjust to the traffic patterns that we expect when this project's built. So we don't believe that any timing adjustments are required at that location because of the way the signal is designed and operating. So that's a good thing. The site has been designed in accordance with your ordinances and the intent to be pedestrian-friendly. Wide sidewalks are provided along the frontage with linkages into the piazza, linkages into Woodmont Way to the various points of access, and certainly maintaining the linkage between the shared use parking garage and the train station. So pedestrian access is excellent on this site. People will be able to find it very walkable to the CBD, to points of interest in and around the facility, and that's appropriate for transit-oriented development, particularly in this particular case located in your downtown area. So I believe from that standpoint, the design proposed more than accommodates the pedestrian needs here, and actually, as we heard last night, invites the public and pedestrians into the piazza and provides ample space to do that. So that's a feature you don't see quite often in development projects. With regard to parking, the parking solution on this site is the parking deck as discussed last night, which will have approximately 753 parking spaces. It'll be a shared facility with commuters, patrons of your retail public, and the residents. The deck will have more than ample spaces in it to accommodate the needs of the residents of this particular facility. As was discussed last night, the experience of Woodmont is that at transit-oriented developments, they're finding that their residents' needs for parking are actually much less, again, than you would have to provide for in a more suburban location. So with 753 spaces available, the parking needs for the site more than meet the needs of the residents of this facility and provide for a really good shared opportunity to fill the deck at night, empty out towards the day, and still accommodate the needs of commuters in this site. So it makes it a very efficient deck instead of having just a deck there that handles commuters during the day and is empty weekends and at nights, and really a waste of parking spaces. It's just a very efficient way to provide parking in a downtown area, and with a combined use such as your commuter parking needs and the TOD. So I think that'll work. Access to the deck, it was described last night, 2 points of access, one from Woodmont Way and the other from Pearl Street. In my opinion, that's an appropriate way to provide access to the deck. It will provide for good circulation into the deck. The deck is very simply laid out, as discussed last night, very easy to navigate, and as described by the parking design consultant last night, very friendly to the users of the deck. With regard to the striping in the deck, there is a design waiver requested for the size of the spaces on the upper deck level floors, 8.5 by 18 versus your requirement by 9 by 18. I would reinforce the testimony you heard last night. It is my experience that decks are typically and properly striped at the 8.5 by 18 spaces. That also works real well because of the type of users that you have of this deck, particularly those upper levels, which are long-term parkers. You have commuters during the day, they're not moving in and out of spaces. You have residents at night that are generally not moving in and out of those spaces. The lower deck is 9 by 18, where we anticipate maybe a little bit more turnover associated with non-commuters and non-residents availing themselves of the retail in the area. And I think that's an appropriate way to approach striping and maximizing the parking spaces in the deck. Certainly granting that waiver will not compromise any health, safety, or welfare, and it will function properly, and it is, as was stated last night, a design standard that is typical. So we're not asking for anything unusual in this particular instance. With regard to Woodmont Way, there was a question raised by the public last night and followed up by somebody on the board. I don't recall, I think Ms. Bush, it might have been you, with regard to RSIS compliance, Residential Site Improvement Standard compliance of Woodmont Way. I'll give you two answers to that. First of all, the design of Woodmont Way is actually not subject to RSIS standards, Residential Site Improvement Standards. RSIS is very clear that when you have a mixed-use development, the only portions of that development that are subject to the RSIS standards are those elements that are isolatable solely to the residential use. Woodmont Way has a shared use to it. Commuters will be able to use it. The residents certainly will use it, and there's nothing stopping patrons of the retail from coming in and out of that way. So it's not an isolated residential use. That being said, if this was just purely a residential project and the garage was purely residential, we would be RSIS compliant anyway, because Woodmont Way is nothing more than an extended driveway connection to a garage of 753 parking spaces. The only portion of RSIS that would apply in a apartment a rental complex such as this with either a surface parking lot or a garage is that if you had more than 100 spaces, you need 2 points of access. We have 2 points of access to the garage. We comply with that location. The turnaround design feature at the end of Woodmont Way is an elected design feature by the developer. It is not a requirement of RSIS, and in this particular case, it has been designed to accommodate the types of vehicles that would use and turn around at that location, basically going to the porte cochere and drop-off area of the lobby. So a de minimis exception, a waiver from RSIS standards is not required to be acted on by this board.
I'm not going to disagree with you, but isn't the issue whether the driveway, whether it is a driveway or whether it is an interior roadway? In other words, you're regarding it as a driveway.
In a multifamily development like this, it is, by function, that's exactly what it is. It's just a long driveway to to the garage or to the parking area. If that was surface parking, it would just be a long driveway. RSIS differentiates by streets in subdivisions, and I think what was being referred to in this particular comment was the width of the cul-de-sac bulb. And that standard really only applies under residential subdivisions, single-family subdivisions, in a cornfield, so to speak, where there's a requirement that it be 80 feet wide at the end of a cul-de-sac.
I think that was what my point was. In other words, what you're saying is this is not a street.
Correct.
This is a driveway.
Correct.
Okay.
So loading activities for the residential is accommodated basically in the back, next to the back-of-house locations, and there's an area set aside to accommodate the types of vehicles that would be involved with moving people and moving out. As you heard last night, these units are relatively small, so the types of vehicles you're looking at are rider trucks, U-Hauls, trucks, and small step vans, so there's more than enough room to accommodate that. It should be noted in this type of facility, those activities are regulated activities. Somebody moving in or out of this facility schedules their time, and as was indicated, this is a managed facility with management and superintendent on time, so that is an actively managed situation. So you don't end up with a queue of vehicles and problems with 5 trucks showing up, because that's all managed by the management, and that's typical, particularly in urban areas. And I believe that'll function quite well. Loading for the retail has been provided for with a small pull-out area, back-in area that feeds a service corridor to the back of house on the retail off of Pearl Street. And again, given the size of this retail, that'll be mostly small truck deliveries too. So that's been provided for, and I believe that'll work quite well. I think...
Did you address the issue of school children, or I can't talk yet?
We haven't opened the public portion, but you will be given an opportunity to ask your questions when the testimony is over.
Thank you, sir.
No problem.
Just one more comment on the traffic generations. Obviously, any project that's new to an area will generate some new traffic and modest traffic. In this particular case, it is self-mitigating by the fact that it is oriented towards serving residents' needs to use the train, and also by the fact that there will be some displacement of commuter traffic that's already coming to the site. But the other thing I would note that's advantageous of this particular site that I did not mention, and I would like to mention, is that the traffic from this particular site also has great regional connectivity and wants to dissipate in many different directions, so that as you go out the driveway, basically our traffic is going in 4 different ways. You have Main Street that brings you out to the Route 1 corridor towards the Woodbridge areas where there's shopping, retail, and employment opportunities. You have Lake Avenue 27, which brings you down to the 287 corridor, which is another route to go. You have 27 itself, which brings you north to the Garden State Parkway, and then Middlesex Avenue again, which brings you down to interchange with 287. So the traffic almost is going to split 25%, 25%, 25% in 4 different ways. So as soon as you move away from the site, it really dissipates quite quickly, and that's another advantage of this particular site that we were finding. And I think that summarizes, and I believe I hit on what I heard last night as questions.
You did. I have one last kind of wrap-up question, Carl. In your expert opinion, having reviewed the plans and done the traffic data, is it your opinion that the design of the development is adequate for control over vehicular and pedestrian traffic?
Yes, I do. I believe so.
Thank you. Right on.
First, I'm going to open it up to the board to ask
Yeah,
the
can you
questions.
explain that? I mean, I heard the answer, but could you go into that a little more, please?
Well, it goes into the statement that I made with regard to our evaluation of the access of the Pearl Street driveway or Pearl Street intersection with New Street, the operation of Woodmont Way, and the ability for those vehicles to move in and out of the site without congestion and freely. And it goes beyond that in this particular case to the adequacy, actually, in design of pedestrian movement, too, in this particular case, which I think are important elements of actually your ordinance and your design intent, and has been accomplished in this plan from my review of it.
Okay, thank you.
Regarding the parking deck, you mentioned the 2 entrances. Did you do any projection or analysis on the expected split of volume between
Sure.
those 2 entrances?
Yeah, and I think you heard it last night. The way the deck is laid out, your primary or sloped floor is the southern floor, which lends itself to the main access from Pearl Street. So when we did our analysis, we had reviewed the design of the deck and the access opportunities, and we do anticipate that upwards of 75% of the traffic would probably come in and out of Pearl Street. But we did also check a high level of traffic coming in and out of Woodmont Drive. You know, traffic's funny. It'll ultimately seek its own level based upon your comfort level, and some people will feel making this right turn and getting into the deck is a lot more simpler than shooting down to Pearl Street. We all have those little idiosyncrasies. I take a way to work that no one else would think about doing just because I like the ride in the particular neighborhood. I don't get on Route 1. So in the end, it'll seek its own level. But the real important element is we found that there's capacity in both those intersections, and we did test this as the main way in.
Thank you.
What were the percentages of cars coming in from Main Street and from Lake Avenue?
We did do a little bit of journey to work analysis to try to figure out where traffic would be coming to and from as part of it. So taking a look at demographic data where in peak hours for residential, you're really looking at people going to work and coming from work, those that don't take the train. So basically, we were finding that about 22% of our traffic would want to go down Main Street towards Route 1, to and from that area. We were seeing about 26% of our traffic wanting to head up and north and down north from on 27 up to the Garden State Parkway. And because the linkages to 287, we were seeing about 34% actually going down Lake Avenue and around through those two new signals, heading down that way towards Piscataway and so forth. And then lastly, the least amount was actually going down Middlesex Avenue, about 18%. So like I said, it's almost 25 when you boil it down. But that, you know, we did do a little more detailed analysis based upon demographic data, and that was the actual splits we calculated. Yeah, so, and like I said, that it just helps dissipate traffic. So for instance, if you had 100 cars coming out of this site in the morning, which would be conservative new estimate, I think it's less than that. You end up, by the time you get down to Lake Avenue or get up to Main Street, it's 25 trips. It's, you know, less than less than 2 cars every minute as you move away, and you could see how quickly that would just be absorbed by the traffic stream. And that's not to say that you don't have heavy traffic flow in this area. Sure. We're in northern New Jersey, you're in an urban area, and there's, you know, relatively heavy traffic on our roads.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions from board members?
Yeah.
There was some.
Are you, I guess you're not proposing any kind of traffic control where Woodmont goes to New Street?
We would. It would be stop sign controlled.
A stop sign?
Yes. As it is today coming out of that driveway. Yes.
I don't know if this question is for you or for Stephen. You talked about putting a circle at the end of Pearl Street yesterday, and then that came off the table at some point. Can you explain why? And wouldn't it be better to have that circle down there? Because you're going to be having trucks coming down to service the business. You're going to have...
Let me hit it first. Or Dante, but let me hit it first. First of all, basically the access to the site remains as is today. There's already an access at this location, significant access to the commuter lot, and then the second access is actually where Woodmont Way is. The concern with creating a circle at the end of Pearl Street, first of all, it operates well today without it. Anybody coming down Pearl Street really would be coming into the deck, so they don't have a need to turn around. Any traffic that we're generating has a place to go. With regard to loading, we've provided the ability for vehicles to move off of Pearl Street, back in, turn around, and come out, so we don't need a turnaround element for loading vehicles. So basically, what in effect a circle or a turnaround at that location would have a purpose for would be for traffic that for some reason isn't destined to the deck coming down there, which if they're not doing it today, there's really no reason to expect for that to occur in the future. But I think the bigger concern is, given the proximity to the train station, if you start to put an area here that's convenient for turnaround and curbside drop-off, You may actually invite people to come here and wait for people on the train because there's really not a lot of good opportunity near the station. So you actually may create problems here by attracting some people as this becoming a kiss and ride. That would be our concern, that we don't need it. We don't see any of what we're doing here creating something different that's there today. And if you created that type of a design element, you might actually create some problem. And then lastly, it does impact a good definition of flow in and out of the deck and queue distances in and out of the deck. So right now, we've got a good definition of a driveway, and we've got great queues areas into and out of the deck, so it would reduce that design element with no real benefit, particularly to this project.
Thank you.
Other board members with questions?
What kind of traffic increase are the residents to expect during the 2 years of the construction portion of the project, during those 24 months? What kind of increase of traffic as to what we have now as compared to during those 2 years?
Yeah, it's probably going to be dynamic and change over time because of what you heard a little bit last night is how things are going to be staged. Generally, what's going to happen, I think, is you're going to see reduced traffic flow in this area because the commuter lot's going to be taken offline, or portions of it. Ultimately, there's going to be a period where there is no commuter, and then it's going to come back online. So in general, you'll see a reduction. Now, certainly, you're going to have construction-related traffic, associated with the actual workers on site, not so great. The impacts are probably greater with your materials deliveries and so forth, but that is something that is worked out between the contractor and your traffic safety officer as they move through construction and have the ongoing conversations on how to deal with the materials deliveries and so forth. But in general, the existing commuter lot is, people are going to sort of be dispersed to other locations and away from this particular site. And until it comes fully back online, it won't normalize again.
Mr. Penke, how long does it take between the time you exit the garage on Woodmont for, you've repeatedly used the phrase disperse. Right now, when a train comes in and people go to their cars,
Correct.
It's a significant backup of cars. How will that be handled under this design?
Sure, that's probably one of the difficult aspects of hosting a train station, that peak occurrence when people are racing to their train in the morning and then all getting that particular train and then coming back. That doesn't change. Those peaking characteristics that you see there today don't change, and they're factored into our analysis. With regard to the project itself and the residential component of it, it doesn't aggravate that peaking because the movement of vehicles in and out associated with the residential development is more moderated. Everybody doesn't leave at the same time. They leave over a 2 or 3 hour period. So generally what you see in residential developments is traffic movement out of a complex starting, say, 6 o'clock in the morning as people start to make their way to work, and that kind of activity occurs to mid-morning, and then it mellows down through the day, and then you start to see people arriving back, and a little more in and out activity occurring over that 2, 3, 4 to 7 o'clock period while people are coming back from work or starting their evening activities, whether they're going out for dinner or shopping and so forth. But it is a more moderated flow that doesn't peak like the train station does. But the train station peak that you're experiencing now, which does cause those momentary, sometimes a little more than momentary backups, that is just going to be there. That's going to continue.
Yeah, I guess there's just the added concern, not with more traffic generation because of the residential use, but more pedestrian traffic
Sure.
in this area, probably, coinciding at least with some of your high traffic movements because of the train.
Sure, and that's where the design elements of this project, providing for proper pedestrian accommodations, are important. I believe that one of the specific elements is to make sure that there were wide sidewalks on this site, 10 feet wide sidewalks, so that people were comfortable away from the road, the piazza. So really your conflict point is crossing Pearl Street at a controlled intersection and stop sign. And then as discussed last night, with regard to movement between the train station and the deck, we still continue to accommodate that without conflicting cars and pedestrians by the movement of the to and from the deck and the elevators to the south side of the driveway, so they're not conflicting with the vehicles and are able to get to that alleyway and continue over to the train station. So, and that's probably the biggest issue at that location. The two conflicts you've got that I observed that are pretty significant are actually over on Main Street, where people let out and then they're all crossing where the flashing light is when a train comes in, and that'll stay the same. But over here, we won't have that issue. You'll be able to move in and out of the deck vehicularly, while pedestrians will be able to move to and from that alleyway without interfering with the cars, so it's a safe movement.
Okay, other questions?
Can you speak a little bit about the intersection then at Center Street and at Pearl for pedestrian crossing? On the colored rendering we have here in the book, it looks like there's brick or sort of a traffic calming kind of crosswalk. Is that still in the plan?
Well, that whole Center Street, Pearl, New Street intersection, not Center Street, Pearl Street. You're talking about Pearl Street or Center
Both.
Street?
I see on Pearl Street, that's the extension of the piazza, so that's obviously included those brick. But on Woodmont Way, there seems to be crosswalks that might be more clearly defined than they are now, because you will have more people probably crossing.
Yeah, there's two elements to that answer. One of the questions, and was discussed last night, was improving the handicap ramps at Center Street and Woodmont Way, subject to right-of-way being available. So that'll be an aid, upgrading the handicap ramps at that particular location. And the plan does entail enhancing the pedestrian walkways or crosswalk definitions at that intersection.
So there'll be a change in texture for cars to hopefully think about
That's-
slowing down.
If I could just, that wasn't originally there, this was a recommendation of your professionals, which we think is a good one. It's also going to include a bump out off of the curb to sort of pull everything in, give everybody a safe place to stand and to calm the traffic as it comes down to it. We like it too, because obviously this is a great front door for us, so we want to have not only an attractive entrance, but also one that's calm and safe.
And there will be, that's where the stop sign will also
Correct.
be, correct?
The side streets, Center Street and Woodmont Way will both be the side streets that are stop sign controlled, correct?
Chairman?
Yes.
Were there any other recommendations that our borough planner seeks the applicant to comply with when it comes to pedestrian safety? I'm just asking to make sure that all the recommendations are being adhered to by the applicant.
Right, well, there are other, maybe while we're just on that intersection, there is a discrepancy between the drawings, and part of that was because it was a recommendation we made last week during a pre-application review. So I just wanted to clarify that the entire intersection at Woodmont Way and Center Street will be texture paved and treated, not just the crosswalks. One of the drawings shows just crosswalks, but... Thank you. That's it. So that intersection effectively will have the bump outs, which will shorten the pedestrian crossing distance. It will be texture paved, which also serves as a warning coming into the piazza for drivers.
Thank you.
Jim, you're talking both New and Pearl and Center and New.
Yes, I'm referring to, yes, Center and New, just clarifying that
Correct.
one. Thank you.
Okay, other questions from board members? Okay, I'm going to ask our professionals now, since they probably have some issues from their memos that may, I know that maybe not so much Lisa, but maybe you, Jim? Nothing?
Lisa has a couple of
Okay.
questions.
I just have a couple things. Most of them were answered by Mr. Penke. Thank you very much. You talked about the timing and the sensors and everything over on Lake and New. What about over at Pearl and New? Is there any, did you investigate that at all, or is that something that could be revisited once the project's up and
Pearl
running?
and New is unsignalized.
It's unsignalized
Yes,
over there?
stop
Oh,
sign.
okay. Stop, oh, yes, it is a stop sign, I'm sorry. But in the event that once it's up and running, post-construction, there's some issues with it. I'm sure the client would like to revisit that if they could, if there's some issues with traffic, timing, and everything.
Yeah, on a state highway, generally, it's an actual inquiry to DOT itself to come out and just investigate an intersection on timing if something's not.
Yeah, I think that's
appearing to be operating.
important later on when if it's all working and there's some issues with timing and everything out of there. And
I
think
don't expect it based upon what I saw in the timing directive, but certainly that's always an option.
You did an analysis. Do you have anything that you're going to submit at all, or is there a conclusion that you have that could be submitted to our office just for further review, or you didn't do anything formal?
Wasn't intending on anything formal, but we do have information that we can put together and see.
Yeah, if we could just see some of that, just so I can have my traffic department take a look at some of that.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think the board would like to take a look at that as well.
Sure. Okay.
I could report anything back.
Yeah, I think that, again, I thought that we already had that, but in our professionals' hands, but certainly if we don't, we would want to make that a condition so that we can ensure that our professionals have vetted it. It sounds like you did a lot of due diligence, and I'm
Yeah,
sure
we'll
we'll be
wrap
fine,
it up,
but we want to make
put a
sure.
bow on it and submit it as a condition of approval. It basically embodies what I testified to this evening.
There we go.
What about any signage down Pearl Street as it's a dead end, it's not a through street? Is there any thought to that or any protection of the pedestrians on that walkway through? Right now, it's just sort of, it's a little dark right now. I know there's some lighting going in there. But, you know, at night, it'll be a little well lighted. Right, you asked for additional lighting down that way along Pearl?
I didn't ask for anything further along.
I just know it's dark down there. If we can get any sort of
I think
signage or typical MUTCD as to sort
dead
of...
end or no outlet or something.
Something to that effect. I'm not sure exactly what would work, but I think it should be investigated. I don't know if there's
Yeah,
any sort of...
certainly no outlet or dead end signage could be added. In terms of lighting, I think you're going to find a different character to Pearl Street when you're done because of the piazza and the lighting there. That's certainly going to
Yes.
lighten it. And the garage, as you heard, the lighting in that last night, so down near the end, is certainly will be some influence from that. And the entrance to the garage is going to be well lit. So that's going to change the character of the end, quite frankly. So I think lighting-wise, you're going to be okay. But we could certainly look at a few signs. But the other thing I would suggest on the signage is I hate to put in signage that just for putting in signage, because I'm a little bit concerned about the piazza. It's so nice. I
Yeah, I
hate to
know,
add a few
yeah. So I
signs
said
along there
no outlet.
and ruin
Looks a
all the
little
work that's
silly.
been done.
Yeah.
Pinky read my mind, yes, the concept of shared
You know, I'm looking at this saying I can put a great dead end
Yeah,
sign.
no, that's why I said it's not all that great, but...
So the board can consider that and that we can work with it, but my suggestion is it's probably not needed because it's already a known element, so it's not as if we're creating a new street that people are going to explore, and the people that are going down that street have a destination, so you know, I leave it to the board and the professionals. In my recommendation, I don't think it's needed, particularly given what it might do to the design.
Yeah.
I hate to influence what's shown here.
Right. So Mr. Penke, you would also endorse, consistent with the shared space concept, that we try to get all the signage, if we can, or as much as possible, out of that shared space zone and let the space
Yeah, bare
slow traffic
minimum
down.
for proper direction. You know, certainly we need a stop sign in proper locations for safe traffic control. But, you know, we can avoid over-signing this particular area. Sometimes we do that.
Okay. Other questions from our professionals?
I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. Any board members, before I open it up, any other questions for this witness? Okay. Just a reminder, or perhaps news to those who weren't with us yesterday, what we're going to ask you to do is if you have questions that are specific to traffic engineering and this witness, that because we're televising this on Metuchen television, that you come up to the microphone, tell us your name and your address, and then ask your questions for this witness. And counsel? Well, I was just about to say, counsel, I don't know if you put a pad up there for people to sign in today?
Yes.
You did,
It's on
okay,
the
so
other
we'll
side.
also ask you to write your name and address down on that piece of paper.
Do it now.
Okay, on Crystal Asmar, 16 Halsey Street, that's over in Metuchen. For this witness in technical engineering, I would just like to, I realize the idealistic point of the pretty piazza, but I gotta tell you, 10 days ago, I did see somebody laying in Main Street that had been hit by a car, bleeding, and was taken away by an ambulance. That's where you had your blinking and clanging lights, right by Main Street and the train station. It is very unsafe for pedestrians. So I realize how you want it to look all nice, but keep in mind the signage, keep in mind the street light. There was a gentleman that was hit at the same intersection last year and is still in a wheelchair. So pretty much for this witness, that's all I have to say. Except I would like to remind the board that when they took down the Franklin School and they said that those apartments would be for adult professionals, that did not occur. And a lot of stuff had to go on with the school. So don't think it's just going to be young professionals in there, because that's not going to happen.
Okay.
I appreciate that, and just to reiterate for the public, when engineers design, we do design for maximum safety, and that is our intent, and we will not compromise safety.
All right, I want to also say that you talked about the analysis. The light that is set up over there on Route 27 and Lake is not even on yet. So how can you analyze what isn't working? They just finished the bridge.
The intersection I was specifically referring to and the board engineer requested is actually New Street and Lake. With regard to Amboy and Lake, or 27 and Lake and 27.
Lake and 27.
Yeah, that one will be coming online shortly from my understanding with the DOT, and it is intended, as designed to improve the traffic flow.
Okay, well, I hope you keep an eye on that.
Okay, anyone else?
By the way, thank you, ma'am. One of the things that happened there was what I thought was going to be a statement, actually did turn out to be a question at the end, but it occurs to me that not everybody who was here tonight was here last night. So let me just give you the rules, which are, at this point, we're taking questions for the traffic engineer. That's all. So if you have a question, you can come up and ask the question. If you have a statement, if you have information you want to give to the board, if you just want to say you're in favor of or against, or you think something should be here and not there, you're going to save that until the end, and then we're going to have a public portion where everybody who wants to speak and give their opinion, hopefully will get a chance to do that.
Very good, thank you, counsel.
Thank you. My name is Tom Mullins. I live at 67 Oak Avenue. I have a few questions, and I was not here last night, so I apologize if there's some repeat.
No need to apologize.
One, at least tangentially related to parking, I was just curious if there was thought given to putting any part of the parking garage underground, and is that just something that's exceptionally expensive or otherwise?
I'm not the garage consultant, but I would suspect it would be exceptionally expensive to do.
Okay. I have a few questions. Two, so there were the two choke points kind of for the garage, for lack of a better word. Is there not room to go on the back to allow for a third exit on kind of the?
No.
No, there's not room. Okay. And you had mentioned the number of spots in the garage. How many are there in the current lot, and what is the difference there?
Today is roughly 660 plus or minus spaces in the existing lot, depending upon some of the people that squeeze in into non-spaces. And there's proposed in the deck roughly approximately 753 spaces.
Okay. And I think you answered some of the others. Why is it called Woodmont Way?
It's a private driveway, it's not really a road, it's a placeholder for now.
Would you be open to public commentary on the naming of Woodmont?
If you'd like to contribute to this construction, we consider.
Tom the Holloway.
I've been trying to get one of my daughter's names on one of the projects over the years. I've yet to succeed.
Okay, other members from the public.
Good evening, my name is Mike Guarino, I live at 330 Grove in Metuchen. I also have a couple of questions relating to the parking. What I understood, and you just repeated it, and I missed it last night as well. The current lot is 660 spaces, the new deck is 753.
Correct.
Which begs the question, how many of those will be allocated to the residents? And therefore, the net effect could be less spots for the commuters than currently available? And are there other spaces in Metuchen to make available additional spaces to accommodate it?
Okay, so the proposed management of the deck is not at this point in time, proposing to restrict any particular spaces for user groups. It will be a shared deck from that standpoint, and so that when residents empty out during the day, commuters will be able to use the deck. But you are correct, there will be a net effect of some reduction in available commuter spaces, because certainly not everybody leaves during the day. That final number, is hard to pin down, so I really can't testify as to exactly what that would be. With regard to other available spaces, the testimony last night is that the Parking Authority is actively involved with this project, and they are looking at other ways to maximize their other facilities as part of this ultimately. So it's going to be a managed situation as it moves forward.
Because a bigger concern is also, you had alluded to in your testimony, that during the construction period, there'll be a phase where it'll be reduced, and then at some point, I don't know for how long, there'll be no parking at all at Pearl Street, which as a 30-year commuter, I have a spot in another lot on Halsey Street. So I'm just wondering what the ripple effect of overnight losing 660 spaces is going to be for whatever time period in question, but I find that's going to be hard to replace within the boundaries of Metuchen.
Correct, and there was a little discussion about that last night, and while it's not in the purview of the board, there was testimony placed in order to create some comfort that this hasn't been not thought about. Again, the Parking Authority is coordinating very closely with the developer, and they are looking at various options to maximize the facilities that they have. They talked a little bit about, as construction goes, we may have some valet on this site on portions that we can keep open, and then they talked a little bit about using and identifying remote lots and maybe some shuttle service. So it's going to be a combination of a managed approach to addressing impacts during construction.
And one comment, I don't know if this has been thought about with the Parking Authority or not, but history has indicated that a large percentage of the current parking is used on a secondary basis by non-residents in Metuchen. So I don't know what percentage that is, but has any thought been given to kind of phasing that out, as I don't know if any non-residents ever drop off the list, because I know there's a waiting list, but to try to make more spaces available to Metuchenites by kind of phasing out or further restricting future non-residents from coming on board to kind of make new spaces available in Metuchen.
That actually was touched on last night also, and that is something that is under consideration. It's nothing that is within our control, it's really the Parking Authority.
Right, it might be helpful to the process. Last question, kind of tangentially related to the parking, but also what consideration is being given to the ripple effect on New Jersey Transit trains themselves? Again, being a daily commuter, I can tell you from Metuchen every morning, by the time the train gets to Metro Park, quite often it's maxed out. People can't even get on the train at certain times. So the question will be, and I don't know if any estimates have been made of what percentage of the new residents, because it is a transit-centered project, what percentage that will add to the current load. I don't know if New Jersey Transit has the wherewithal to add these additional trains or cars. I know the budget is tight there. Has any analysis been done in that regard?
Not by the developer, but I can tell you, in having worked with New Jersey Transit over the years, they are always making projections and monitoring of what's going on. They are obviously encouraging transit-oriented development to help fund and improve their facilities, and they look to react to these types of things. So while it's not part of this application, it is certainly something that I know firsthand knowledge that New Jersey Transit is always monitoring and reacting to.
I would think because of the relatively large impact of this project for a town the size of Metuchen, that some kind of dialogue really should be opened up with New Jersey Transit along these lines, because I can imagine the ripple effect is going to be important.
You're 100% right, and we actually had a meeting with New Jersey Transit probably 6 or 8 months ago. The mayor came down, the folks in the Parking Authority, they're obviously very much in support of this type of development. To your point about increasing the train, we did look at this, not necessarily arm in arm with New Jersey Transit, but as you indicated, there will be somewhat fewer parking spaces available for commuters. Right now, all 670, and the estimates go as far as high as 700 of people parking up on the grass and so on, they're all getting on the train. So there's going to be a reduction of that, and I can tell you that in calculating these numbers, the Parking Authority has been very careful, whether it's been with regard to the interim parking plan or the end result, that the Metuchen residents that are requiring parking will be taken care of. And that's always come up in the conversations. We need to have so many spaces with regard to interim parking because we want to make sure everybody who lives in Metuchen is part of that plan. If you're coming in from another town, you may have to go up to Metro Park or somewhere else during the construction period. But just to get back to my point, we're going to be reducing the number of commuters that are coming out of that lot right now because, as you indicated, there'll be multiple uses in the parking deck. We estimate that 20 to 20, anywhere, and the numbers vary, and we own, one of the largest transit villages in Morristown, and our numbers vary between like 16 and 23 or 24% of those people get on the train. So our whole facility isn't just going right onto the train. A lot of them they'll work in town, they'll work a lot right around here. So they'll get the decrease in the number of people getting on the train from the existing lot, and then you'll get a little bit of an increase because of our residents. So the numbers should be pretty even, Steven, as far as those getting on the train. The timing may change a little bit, but you shouldn't see this tremendous impact where you can't find a seat anymore.
Okay, hopefully that's the case. But thank you
Great.
for your input.
Thank you.
Scorino, we need for you to sign in before you go away, and I remind everybody who comes up, please sign your name and address on the sheet. Thank you.
There we go. Okay, and any other members of the public with questions relative to traffic engineering?
Good evening, Hussein Ali Khan, 15 Ohio Avenue. Could you go back to the site plan that you had up there before? Could you just explain to me what those artifacts on the drawing are on Woodmont Way?
Oh,
Yeah.
sure. These artifacts are a representation of a single-unit vehicle, a loading vehicle. So in effect, these are the back-of-house space, and that's where somebody would schedule, that's scheduled to move in or move out, would temporarily park to access the buildings.
So that's actually loading dock over there?
It's not a loading dock. These are all brick pavered and well-defined pedestrian areas. This is just a representation of a vehicle. These are actually planters. This is the front door to the lobby, so these are actually defined elements and planters. Actually, are they columns up to a portico? Those are cars. These are cars here. Oh, those are cars up there too. Okay.
Okay, so that's effectively a cutout for pickup and drop off?
It's basically a leveled shared space with a defined pathway by different texture pavement.
Okay. Now, you described that as a driveway.
Correct.
But effectively, it's become a street because it is access to the parking garage.
Well, it's access to the development. By definition, access to the development is a drive aisle.
Okay, I guess there's rules to define that
Yeah.
stuff. But what I'm a little concerned about is that there's going to be just as much traffic on that street or driveway as there is going to be on Pearl Street, or effectively a significant amount.
Well, anybody moving in and out of the deck has the election to move in and out of either driveway. As people learn the deck, they're going to tend to find Pearl Street to be the more convenient way in, basically because if you're entering from Woodmont Way and you enter the deck, you're entering on the level deck and then have to come all the way down to where the Pearl Street entrance is anyway to circulate and start circulating up the deck. So if you know on any given day, and like all of us, when we go to work on a given day, you're probably pretty much in the same parking space every day. On a facility like this with residential, pretty much when you come home at night, you're going to be finding your parking space. So if you know you're on the upper levels, you're going to find coming in from Pearl Street probably the more direct way to circulate up to your space.
Okay, now, over at the corner of New Street and Pearl Street,
Yes.
You did not indicate that there'd be any sort of traffic control at that point.
Yes, I did. Pearl Street is currently stop signed on both sides, and that will be maintained.
Okay, pardon me. No sort of automated traffic control?
What's that?
No sort of traffic light?
We
or
don't need a
anything?
traffic signal at that location.
We do not. Can you explain to me why we wouldn't need one there?
Basically, we've modeled it with stop sign control, and we're finding that the capacity is there to accommodate the movement of vehicles. Traffic signals, in evaluating traffic signals, traffic engineers look at several things. They look at capacity, the ability of the vehicles to move safely through the intersection, and then there's actually defined warrants that we need to evaluate from a volume standpoint and so forth to determine if a signal is actually warranted and can be certified by an engineer. In this particular case, the volumes at that intersection are nowhere near warranting a traffic signal, and in fact, we find that it operates well with the stop signs, as it does today.
Okay, fair enough, but what about the condition where now we've got a population that lives on the west side of Pearl Street, and we've got the downtown on the east side there? There's going to be considerably more pedestrian traffic around that area.
Sure.
How would you recommend that we would help improve the safety of pedestrians at that intersection?
Well, that's accomplished by a lot of the treatments that are being proposed at this intersection with the traffic calming features associated with extending the piazza basically into the street with textured pavements. Certainly the stop sign control on the side streets. But if you were here last night, you were here last night, if you saw the piazza that was presented by Mr. Carmen, I did. He went through a lot of detail of how that all looked and worked, and it's been designed to embrace the pedestrian, quite frankly, which I think is the intent of this whole project.
I guess that's kind of the point of my question, is that the piazza has been designed to embrace the pedestrian.
Right.
And I understand that, probably 330 days of the year, there's not going to be a whole bunch of activity in there beyond the casual or residential activity, but there is going to be occasions where events may take place.
Right.
We have a very active June Bug Festival here that occurs during the summertime. We've got a couple of other really cool events that the folks put on Main Street. So there is quite a bit of traffic.
Correct.
Pedestrian traffic.
That could be associated with those types of events.
Those types of events.
Yes.
And, while I may not be advocating a automated streetlight kind of setup, would it be valuable to have something like our lights and clangers setup like we have on Main Street?
No, I don't think you need a pedestrian crossing signal at this particular location or in pavement treatments. But the times when there is an event programmed here, it's certainly going to need to be a managed event that maybe employs traffic safety officers to make sure that either the street's closed, if it indeed is that type of an event, or that there's some additional control and proactive involvement with the movement, conflict of movement in vehicles. But that's an event type thing. That's not a daily type situation.
Yeah, no, well, I understand that part, but, as one of the earlier members of the public pointed out, we still have all these really great pedestrian safety tools, and people still get whacked in the middle of Main Street, so.
That's correct.
I'm just wondering.
We try our best to create our designs as safe as possible, but people make mistakes, and
I think we have to recognize that people are going to make mistakes, so
mistakes.
perhaps now would be the time to invest in something before somebody gets run over at the corner
I would
of Pearl
agree, and
and
my
New Street?
suggestion to you is what is being done here is actually taking big steps to that. I mean, the road character is going to change with the textured pavement, high identification, make a motorist aware that he's in a different environment. All of that comes together visually to create a cue for motorists to be more aware, and then safe pedestrian features are provided by the wide piazza, the wide sidewalk, so all of that comes together to create a safer environment in this particular case. You're not driving along on a street that's, blacktop, no change and coming upon here. You're actually coming into an area that is going to pop. It's going to be different. You got different pavement. It's really, look at it this way, it's a passive way to provide motorist identification that he's in a different environment than the proactive way we use at defined pedestrian crossings where we might use the in-pavement lights and so forth. This is a different way to accomplish the same thing, and I think it does that.
But the
Excuse me,
applicant...
if I could just respectfully suggest that we try to make shorter questions and shorter answers, we kind of move along a little bit. Thanks.
I think my questions have been pretty short.
Perhaps what he's saying is more or less, if you have a specific point and he's answered it to your satisfaction, that we addressed additional questions.
All right, well, here's a new question. The corner of Woodmont and New does not have any of those treatments that you described at the corner of Pearl and New.
Well, actually, if you were here a few minutes before, the developer indicated that based upon comments, we are creating similar treatments. We're going to bump out the curb a little bit, and we're going to differentiate the pavement.
Diagram's right over there.
Is that a marked exhibit?
Yes, it is.
It was discussed at length.
Okay, so just, so I reference it.
All right, so I withdraw the question. All right, I think that's all from me today.
Thank you. That was Exhibit A3 for the record.
Okay. Other questions for our traffic engineer, Mr. Salmon?
Yes, Bill Salmon, 23 Bounty Street. In follow-up what Ms. Clarkson was saying, do you know the existing distribution of the parking lot today?
We did take traffic counts. I didn't break down the distribution. It is a little bit heavier used at the Center Street driveway because of the direct way in and so forth. So, based upon just my recollection and observation of the volumes, I would say that that's probably the predominant way into the lot.
Heavier to center?
Center's heavier.
Center.
Yeah.
And then you said in your proposed condition, you flipped it, and you made the volume heavier on Pearl in proposed conditions.
Yeah, we looked at, we actually didn't take any reduction in the commuter lot, although we anticipate that traffic flow dropping a little bit. And then we looked at all the increased traffic as coming down Pearl Street. And we're really not finding, with that conservative approach, any issues.
Yeah, I'm not talking about volume, I'm talking about the number of cars in the deck.
Sure.
75% is going to Pearl, where today 40% goes to Pearl?
Yeah, I'd have to...
40, 60, roughly split?
I'd have to go back and look at them. But
So we're increasing the traffic to the area that we're providing for pedestrians, in follow-up to what a lot of people are saying. Can you flip the deck, or flip the distribution so 75% go out the new driveway?
No, I think the way it's designed actually makes a lot of sense, because this is also a high pedestrian area with a lot of activity associated with the front door and movement of people. So keeping the primary access from Pearl Street, I think, is actually an appropriate approach.
So the pedestrian activity at the driveway is going to be equal to the plaza? Is that what you're saying?
No, it's a different activity, it's a different design in this location, but keep in mind, your traffic flow, if you're coming in here or coming in here, is still impacting that intersection, maybe a little differently, but you're just coming to a different point of location, so.
Okay.
And again, the design is set up in such a way that it is accommodating the mix of vehicles and pedestrians in a safe manner.
So I got to get back to my question. Can you flip the deck so the distribution goes 75% to center?
I haven't evaluated that, and I'm not sure that can be done.
I think the board should consider that. You said that you're having a shared parking scenario. Do you know the total amount of parking that would be required if you didn't do a shared scenario?
It's actually on the plans that was submitted. Under pure residential site improvement standards, statewide standards, the calculation and the township ordinances would be 533 spaces. However, I would caveat that based upon data published by New Jersey Transit, because you're in a suburban, a CBD, as well as next to a fixed train station, that would be reduced to about 375 spaces that you need to provide if there was no other uses using this site.
Okay, so out of 750, 350 is going to go to residents, and the balance is going to go to commuter?
Well, the residents are there at night, so conceivably you could see 375 cars parked through the night, but then as 6 o'clock in the morning comes, that 375 starts to drop as people go out to work and so forth, and your commuter traffic comes in and backfills.
Okay.
And that's the dynamic you have happening in shared parking.
Okay. What is your shared parking based upon? Is it like an ITE or something like that? How'd you come up with that number? How'd you arrive at 750?
The 753, that was a design number that was worked out between the owner and the parking authority, and limitations of how high you can go with the deck.
So it's not based upon timing of shared different uses or anything like that?
Not specifically. We know we want to maintain a certain, a good, strong level of commuter parking, and we want to add an increase to deal with the additional residential, and we know there'll be a balance in the end on this particular site.
Does any of your literature, I think it's IT, right? Does any of your literature speak to shared parking and timing and things of that nature?
Yeah, there's studies by the Urban Land Institute, actually, that has done a document actually called that shared parking, which has looked at different uses and their variations throughout the day. So that data is available.
And how does those numbers compare to what you're proposing? Do you know, by chance?
Well, they don't really address commuter ebbs and flows, and, commuters come in, by 9 o'clock they're there all day. I could tell you what happens with residential is residential peaks at night, 100%, and what you see by 10 o'clock in the morning, it's dropping to about 70% of the peak demand, and then continues down and then bumps back up.
On the peak demands, the AM and the PM peaks, specifically the PM peaks, what level of service does New and Pearl operate at in a PM peak? And the reason I'm asking this is, we're talking about Friday, people on the piazza, and, when cars hit that intersection, what's the level of service there?
Sure. So quickly, levels of service for members of the public is a way that traffic engineers rate intersections. Everybody here would remember a grade school report card, A being great, F being exactly that, failing. Basically what we see is new street traffic flow, unimpeded, A levels of service, and what we're seeing, various peaks, I don't recall exactly from the analysis, but we're seeing CD levels of service. So they're good levels of service.
Oh, good, very good. And my last question, could you go to the Piazza exhibit that you had up before?
I think so. Am I going in the right direction? That one?
No, go for the close-up one. There you go. And I don't know if this is a question for the applicant or the board professionals, or yourself. Would there be any objection to putting in the Main Street bump out at this intersection? There's a lot of concern about pedestrian and vehicular conflict. If you provide a bump out where the parking stalls are, you get an extra 8 feet by whatever, 50 or better, and that protects the pedestrian, because right now, the way it's set up, the person standing on the curb line, they're blocked by the car when they're going across the street. If you put the bump out in, they're standing on the end of the curb line, they're in the travel way, and that way that the car can see them. So on this side, I believe there's parking on all 4 sides here. You can do a bump out, and that would help the pedestrian conflict. And again, I don't know if that's a question for you, the applicant, or Jim, or
Perhaps
Lisa.
both. I'd like to hear everyone's opinion on that.
So in any event, what you're seeing is at those intersections, particularly on the piazza and then across, exactly how that's done, it hasn't been finalized, but you're seeing the planters and the bollards in the road. Those were originally parking stalls, and both the mayor and Jim Constantine said, let's get rid of those, let's get more visibility, not just for the pedestrians, but for folks that are coming out of Pearl onto New, they have a lot more visibility. So we're showing planters in those two parking spaces and across the way as well, whether or not we actually pull the curb out, but the idea is exactly what you're saying, is to allow the pedestrian to come further into the road and to tell people as they're coming down New Street, I'm in the new world here, I got to slow down, the traffic narrows, et cetera. So that's exactly what's intended.
Okay, and just in a follow-up, the commuters coming out of here Friday at 5 o'clock, they're just ripping through. Do I remember correctly that the curb is flush in this area?
That's what was testified to last evening, yes.
And I guess from a traffic safety standpoint, I don't know if that's the best thing. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I guess in follow-up, how far apart are the bollards for protecting the pedestrian there?
We'd have to check the plans for that. I think they look like about 10 feet apart. To answer your question with regarding the curbing's depressed curb. Curb is not a protection device in traffic engineering and roadway design. Curbing is used more in road design for actual control of water, stormwater. It is not intended to deflect vehicles, so I just want to get that off, make sure that you're clear on that. However, the definition of the roadway that's created by the curb will remain, and then it's reinforced by the bollards.
Thank you. And I wish the board consider the bump outs that we're talking about. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Other members of the public would like to ask questions specifically about traffic engineering?
Jim Smith, 16 Revere Court. One of my main concerns here is how do you get from a very lucrative parking lot, and don't kill the golden goose while you put up this parking deck. Where are you going to park all those cars?
As I indicated before, there was testimony on that last night, although, again, it's not part of the board's approval. It is going to be a carefully managed situation between the parking authority.
Carefully managed doesn't, it's like, where are you going to park them?
All right, that's, if I could just interrupt first of all, let me remind you to sign in if you would. Okay, but secondly, this board is not going to make a determination of what's going to happen in the interim. That's just not the function of the planning board. Right. Well, you can ask the question. I mean, but the answer is that this board is not going to make that determination. There was testimony, extensive testimony last night that the parking authority and the developer will discuss what facilities are available and how to utilize them, and that's what the process is.
If this project ends up like Food Town and ShopRite, or Let's Stop and Shop, it'll be fallow, and this whole parking revenue will be lost. And then it's actually going to be hit up through, like the taxes.
Let me just jump in, because you're going down a road I don't think is possible. First of all, under the contract, we have obligations to create construction within a certain period of time. I have no idea what you're talking about. What's out of my pocket?
This whole construction cost. Well, I mean...
Yeah, that's why we're the developer. So let me finish, and then you can speak all you want. So a couple of things. First of all, the contract with the parking authority requires a relocation of 400 parking spaces. Last night, there was pretty extensive testimony by Nexus. They've already had all their people in town looking at where they can double up spaces, valet spaces. They're going to move, they operate Metro Park, they're going to move 100 cars to Metro Park. So there is significant work that's already gone on and a plan that's already in place or being finalized with the parking authority. And in the contract negotiated however many years ago, they were careful to protect the Metuchen Parkers that there would be a relocation plan that worked. Will it be a slight inconvenience if you're a commuter in that lot? No question about it. But the idea is to keep the inconvenience as little as possible for as short a period as possible. There's also going to be the opportunity for to continue to park on that lot depending on how the construction's phased. So, to your second point, if in fact we don't commence construction within certain timeframes, there is a reverter where the property goes back to the parking lot, to the parking authority. I'm not sure, but my understanding is that the district was private property. Once it changed hands, there's not much the town can do about it. You can't force somebody to build a project that they can't get financing for or can't find investors for. But in this situation, there are provisions that require us to not only move, but to move very quickly in order to preserve the approvals and to continue to be designated by the parking authority.
Yeah, I understand all that rhetoric, but,
And those are facts. If you want to hold them rhetoric, I'll call them facts.
They're facts, okay. We'll hold you to that.
That's why there's contract law.
Okay. Other members of the public?
I have one tiny question. Do you want me to sign in again?
No, you don't have to sign in again, but state your name for the record.
Again, 16 Halsey. I was wondering in the plans and everything, I didn't see anything about, the Veterans Hall over there. When the veterans have an event, they have weddings and stuff over there, right? Where are those people going to park? Isn't that going to be a big influx of traffic? Don't they go there all the time?
Steve, let me do this, if you would. That there is the Veterans Facility, the American Legion is another application. In fact, that's going to be heard this evening. That facility is being moved. It's part of the whole arrangement. It's not going to be there anymore. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, but we'll talk about that later. Let's shove our veterans in a hole.
Okay. Other members of the public with questions for traffic engineering?
Quick question. With regards to the bump out, I'm just curious as to what our professionals felt about that comment that our resident made about bumping that out possibly.
I actually agree with Mr. Salmon. I think that those bollards could come out a little bit at the corner, and they would have a safety benefit. It would choke it down further.
With an emphasis on pedestrian safety, would that be something that the applicant would consider?
Yeah, there's no question. The issue of a bump out is it's typically a curbed area. These are depressed curbs. So it's, depending on whether we treat it differently with a different color cementation or whatever, the idea is that that area around that corner will be preserved for the pedestrian and force the traffic to calm and slow. So we'll definitely work with Mr. Constantine and the engineer to figure out the best way to, to handle that.
Good.
And I know you've done that elsewhere in town, so.
Okay. Does that,
The issue is trying to make sure that,
because we want to move on.
yeah.
Go ahead, we have one more question from the planning board member, and then we're going
With
to...
the parking in that area, how many, since we hopefully are not going to have meters or whatever that discussion comes to, how will people know where I'm sorry, if in fact there aren't meters and we have a different street, I'm just looking at the patterning, which is beautiful, how will cars know where their parking spots are?
Done by the patterning.
So the spots actually delineate?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Very neat way to do it.
Great. That concludes your testimony?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'd like to call Craig Rainkamp, please.
Very good.
You swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give in the proceedings shall be the truth?
I do.
And state your full name for the record.
Good evening. Hopefully you don't mind if I use the rail here to hold my...
Not at all.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Craig, C-R-E-I-G-H, Rahenkamp, R-A-H-E-N-K-A-M-P.
Can you provide the board with your educational background, please?
Yes. Catch this up. Good evening. I'm a licensed professional planner in New Jersey. I've been licensed in New Jersey for 14 years. I've been in the field for 33 years. I've served as a court-appointed master in affordable housing cases and religious use cases. I've been qualified in superior courts in 5 states and 2 federal districts. Was a consultant to the Department of Community Affairs in the development of the residential site improvement standards. Have been qualified as an expert witness in proceedings before COA, the State Planning Commission, and appear before planning and zoning boards throughout the state.
Board will accept Mr. Rainkamp as an expert.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Rainkamp, have you had an opportunity to do a fiscal impact assessment as it relates to the proposed development?
I did.
And can you share with the board your findings, please?
Yes. My role this evening comes in 2 parts. First is the author of the fiscal impact assessment, and we'll go through that. And then secondly, as the planner, there are some findings that are necessary to link the testimony that you've heard from the other professionals back to the decisions that you're going to make in terms of conformance with your ordinances specifically, and ultimately the vote on the application. So first, let me deal with the fiscal impact report that was submitted to you. There are a number of charts that are in the book that was given to you, as well as having been originally in the report, and we're going to put them up here on the board so the public can see them, although I do recognize that the numbers are a bit small when you put data. This is what I'm jealous of Keith and Tom. They get to do pictures, I have to do numbers, but nevertheless, this is where we start. Before we get into the impact of the project specifically, I wanted to talk about sort of the background reality, and you'll find this in the back end of the report. This is table 12. And anybody who served on a governing board, governing body, or served as mayor anywhere in New Jersey has dealt with this reality. And that is that the real estate value of our state has been in decline. Governing bodies have been struggling each year cutting services, not necessarily because costs are going up, but because the value of the real estate in the community has essentially been running away from us. Metuchen can be quite proud that the numbers here are very small compared to other municipalities, From 2007 to today, non-residential has declined by 4.9%. Residential didn't start declining in your municipality until 2009, a couple of years after the recession started, and only went down by 0.6%. In comparison, many of the very Tony, blue blood, happy with themselves suburban municipalities are seeing 20 to 25% reductions in real estate value. So this is something you can be very proud of, that you've held value. But nevertheless, while you're holding value better than others, you're still in a situation in which your governing officials are dealing with reduced tax returns every year. And it's worth remembering that the recession ended 60 months ago, 5 years ago. And in New Jersey, our real estate values are still in decline. So it's not a reasonable strategy for a municipality to say, we're going to wait for the recovery and our real estate's going to come back. We're 5 years into the recovery and we're still trending downwards in most municipalities. So the idea for a municipality wanting to remain healthy in terms of its fiscal balance, that we're going to stand pat, is essentially a losing proposition year in, year out. We really do have to focus on new ratables, new development, revitalization, in order for our fiscal balance within a municipal government to remain healthy over time. So there is a reason to do something. Doing nothing essentially is accepting a slower decline. So that's the basis, before we even get to the project, why we need to do something. And there are 3 lessons from that. One is that your municipality is doing better than everybody else, and you can take pride in that. That we need growth to stay even, but the kind of growth, the third point that I wanted to make, the kind of growth that you want to accomplish not only is positive within its own boundaries, but takes the opportunity for the new growth to provide opportunities for the uses around it to improve as well. The years of work that you've now spent yourselves and with your professionals on this particular project, the testimony that you heard from Keith and Tom about this project, are all about how this project relates to the neighborhood in which it sits. Bringing the amenities that this project would, in many circumstances, internalize for its own residents, putting that on the corner, bringing the paving across the street, invites the uses on the other sides of the streets to improve over time as well. So it's an investment, as we talk about the fiscal impact of this project, looking beyond the frame of this project. It has been designed in a way by the ordinances that you guys have developed and the plans that you've adopted to have a positive influence beyond its particular boundaries. So the fiscal impact that we're going to talk about is really a myopic focus on one particular parcel, but in fact the benefits are going to go beyond that. What I'm showing up on the screen is Table 13A and 13B from the tail end of my report. This is consumer spending on the left-hand column in the borough, or residents of the borough of Metuchen. Their spending power is roughly $384 million a year in the consumer expenditures that are being tracked by Nielsen. These are the folks that are watching your eyeballs to figure out how many percentage points are being watched on TV. They're very good at tracking consumer activity. And on the right, I essentially took the assumption that we would have the same expenditures per capita in the new development that occur now in the municipality. That's a very conservative assumption because of the 1- and 2-bedroom units. We're actually going to have more workers per population, so that we would typically be higher, but I didn't play with the numbers at all. Just the same number that's happening in your community, applying that to the new population. You're going to have $15 million in additional consumer expenditures from the residents that will be on this site. I'm not going to read them all. There are lots of them. You can look at your table, but just a couple of them. Food at home, the kinds of foods that you're getting at grocery stores, greengrocers, $1.4 million in additional expenditures. Food away from home, expenditures that you would have in restaurants, typically about $900,000 would be spent. Daycare, $115,000. Prescription drugs, $677,000. Clothing, $1.2 million. I think that's enough for you to get the idea. Now, I'm not for a second suggesting to you that all $15 million is going to be spent in the borough. I'd be lying to you if I suggested that. If somebody's getting on the train and going somewhere else to work, chances are they're buying lunch at work. People are going on vacation. Some of these expenditures are occurring when they're away from home. But what it does tell us is that there's $15 million in wallets being spent from this address, And all of the merchants within your community are geographically advantaged over everybody else in trying to get a fair share of that slice. So the restaurants in town, the liquor stores, drug stores, all have the geographic advantage of being close to where these people are to spend their money. And I can guarantee you that a share of this is going to be spent locally. So this is the kind of additional thing that occurs within benefiting the community that goes beyond the specific fiscal impact of the development. Oops, that's not the one I want. That's the one I want. So now we're going to turn our focus to the site specifically. And I've turned to the page that has Table 6 and Table 7 for my report. And these address the affordable housing component that we're providing within the community. Let me first say, in terms of doing fiscal evaluation, the basic method, very crude, is to take the amount of money that various levels of government, school district, municipality, spend per capita, look at the new population that we're going to generate, multiply that by the cost, and that's the new cost, and we compare that to revenue. Very simple model. Where the debate and the discussion comes in is, how do you estimate how many people or school children there'll be, and we'll talk about that specifically, and what costs do you use to assign to each of those people? So we'll talk about those, but I wanted to take the affordable component first for two reasons. One is, this is an aspect that creates some controversy. Are you bringing a war on poverty program into our community? What does this stuff really mean? So I wanted to share with the board and then the public some of the incomes. Difficult to read from here, so I'll read some of these to you. In terms of median income in the region, this is the average, if you will, an equal amount of people above and below in terms of the income. For a one-bedroom home within one-bedroom unit within the central New Jersey region, it's about $78,000. Top of moderate is $63,000, top of low is $39,000. Up to a three-bedroom, the top of moderate is $87,000, top of low is $54,000. What you see by those incomes is that we're talking about people that have reasonably good jobs. The principal difference in a household, whether or not they're eligible for this housing or not, is not that they are working in menial labor or something like that. It's really how many workers are in a particular household. Most of us have managed to stay in the middle class by having two workers in the household. If you take two $45,000 jobs, now you've got a $90,000 household and you're doing well. But if one of those people has a disability, or if you've made the conscious decision that one of the spouses is going to stay home while the children are young, and you only have one income earner, even a job that is between $39,000 for the one-bedroom low up to $80,000 in the three-bedroom moderate, one income earner can have a very good job and still qualify. What I also provided to you in Table 7 is the income distribution here in Metuchen. And what you'll see is that the very low income, one bedroom, the lowest income that we have, is still higher than 20% of the existing residents of the borough. The moderate income for three-bedroom top is 45% of the total population in the borough, makes less than that per household. So we're talking about people that are earning incomes that are not inconsistent with what exists in the borough. It's not a different element. It's the kind of people that are already here in the borough. And it's a way for our state to essentially get rent control, if you will, rather than a poverty control program. This is an opportunity for working folks with good jobs to get housing out of the real estate development process. And that's why this COA obligation exists. Excuse me. As was testified by Mr. Santola, we're providing a 15% set-aside. This is a bit higher than the current proposal that's been floated by the Council on Affordable Housing. It's been agreed to by the developer. We have a review letter from Shirley Bishop, your housing consultant, who has acknowledged that our 41 units distributed with 8 one-bedroom, 24 two-bedroom, and 9 three-bedroom meet the appropriate distribution. One comment, just so we're not in the line of agreeing or disagreeing with review letters. I know Shirley very well. She's a good friend of mine. But in her letter, she's referring to the UHAC regulations. They are directly regulatory if you take DCA money. They're not directly regulatory on an inclusionary development. We're governed by your ordinances. Your ordinances, when you get certified by COA, are generally amended to reflect UHAC, but just so we're clear, we're going based on your ordinances adopted here in town. We're not asking for any waivers or exceptions from that, but whether or not that conforms to UHAC is an entirely different question. So we're not asking for any waivers or exceptions. We're going to conform to your guidelines in your ordinance for affordable housing. Now, in terms of generation...
Stop you there for a second.
Yes,
One of the questions that Ms. Bishop raised was to make sure that the developer contracts with a marketer for this development, for the marketing of the affordable units. Are we in agreement that that will be done? And I don't know if this is for you or for Mr. Santola.
Well, let me try, and Steve can correct me if I get it wrong. This is one of the issues between your ordinances and UHAC. Under your ordinances, the municipality retains a housing consultant to provide the annual reports to COA and monitor the process. The developer has the option of hiring their own certified expert to do that. Ms. Bishop in her letter says under UHAC you have to hire the townsperson to do that. Under your ordinances, we're not required to do that. So there will be a certified professional doing it, but under your ordinances, they have the opportunity to hire somebody that's supervised by your person rather than the developer being required to hire your person. So we are agreeing to follow your ordinance. There will be a certified person, but not necessarily the borough's person.
Well, my understanding is that the borough is interested in having the developer hire such a person. So
Yes.
I guess the question is, will the developer comply with that request?
Yes, the developer will absolutely be required to have a certified professional providing that activity.
I heard that answer, but I don't think that was the question that I asked.
Then try it again.
Okay. Is the developer willing to comply with her recommendation with respect to the developer retaining the marketer?
When you say the marketer, do you mean the borough's marketer or other certified professional?
A certified professional.
Absolutely has to have a certified professional.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, on the right-hand column are the multiplier rates that we use to determine the number of school-age children that come from the affordable housing. And as you see, when we get to the results, this is actually where the bulk of the school-age children that we're expecting to generate by this development are coming from. And that occurs because the unit sizes are actually allocated by family size. So you will get school-age children in the 3-bedroom income-restricted units because they are officially allocated to larger-sized households. That's just the way the rules work, and that's definitely where our school-age children are going to come from. You heard testimony from Keith in terms of the architecture, that we were very thoughtful about where those would be. They have the most direct access to the garage. They are stacked because of architectural concerns. You don't change major walls as you're going up and down, but they're stacked in a location where at each floor they have direct access to the garage. So we have thought about how they live within this kind of community because they are demographically different, not because of income, but because these are actually families that will have children, whereas all of the other units don't. So we've thought that through in terms of the architectural design. All right, going to Table 8. This is the table that reports probably about 5 or 6 pages worth of discussion in the report that has the generation rates that we as professionals look at to determine how many people and school-age children are generated by a particular development. The top 3 sections are 3 different alternative models that the Urban Land Institute and Center for Urban Policy Research in a publication in the middle of the 2000s decade developed based on different data sets that they looked at. The third one down was specifically done looking at the kind of development that's being proposed here. Multifamily developments, walking distance to a train station, and referred to as TOD, transit-oriented development. They looked specifically at 10 projects back in the middle of that decade. Most of them were in the Gold Coast. One of them was, in fact, here in Metuchen. There was one in Morristown. So they had some inland, but it was dominated by the Gold Coast in terms of overall data. And in general, they came up with a generation rate of 1 school-age child per 100 units. A very, very low rate. They essentially don't appear in transit-oriented developments, with some rare exceptions. The other two, the top one uses state data. This obviously includes suburbs, all kinds of garden apartments, garden apartments, 5-unit plus structures. And at the state level, they're able to differentiate by rental and sale. They also did it by region within the state, but when they did it by region within the state, they had to lump together. So in one of the categories, it lumps together 2 and 3 bedroom units. As soon as you lump in the 3 bedroom units, you get school kids, and we don't have them. So while you might want to use the central Jersey data because it's geographically more relevant, because of the data limitations, it turns out that the state level data gives us the discrete criteria that we would like. Half a second, please. Yeah. I apologize. I thought I had this table handy.
No problem.
I can read it. There we go. So you'll see quite a variety of results. If we apply the TOD standards to our development, we have 2.3 school-age children coming from the market component. And if we apply the ULI CUPR rates for the state as a whole, we're at 18.6. So somewhere between those two is the appropriate answer. We may not be as low as the TOD number, but we're certainly not going to be higher than what we see from traditional suburban development. Somewhere in there lies the truth. In terms of the income restricted units, we're going to see about 27. That's not going up or down because of the way those things are allocated and wind up being the largest share of our overall school-age population. So that's where the data takes us, and now comes the judgment. Where do we go between 2.3 and 18.6? What makes sense? And there are a couple of things that I do to try and guide me as I try and apply judgment in this. One is to look about the community and see what's going on with other developers in the community. And I talked to 3. Mark Tilbor is a developer here in the community that has apartments on Middlesex Avenue and Pearl Street. He reports no school-age children in any of his units. Has never had school-age children in any of his units, and that's an encouraging statistic. Eric Berger, who reports, and Jim confirms, is the largest apartment owner in the borough, says that he's had 0 in 1 and 2 bedroom units, with an exception. He's had a number of school-age children that have been in households that rented 2 bedroom units, always when these were existing residents in the borough renting an apartment while they were renovating their home here in the community. So these are kids that are already in the district, renting a home, renting an apartment. School-age kids are in the apartment, so if you're counting school-age kids in the apartment, they're going to be there. But they're actually owning other real estate here in the community while redevelopment is going on. Now, the exception to this pattern is Jeff Chassell. He's got 33 apartments on Suburban Square. Historically, he continues to have 0 in the 1 bedrooms. He hadn't had school-age children in his 2 bedrooms until the last couple of years, and he's seen a spike in school-age children in the 2 bedroom units. He now has a few. As much as 0.5, he said, which is a very high ratio. And unfortunately, I don't get to interview families and figure out what the story is and why that one development is out of whack. But it does tell me that I don't want to stand before you and say 1 in 100 is absolutely going to be what it's going to be, because as I talk to 3 developers, I've got one that's got an issue. So I don't want to be telling you that 2.3 is the right answer, but I also know that the suburban number is not going to be right. So I did one more thing. The thing that always gives me the most comfort in saying to a board that you're not going to get high school-age rates in 1 and 2 bedroom units is when I look at what's currently available in the marketplace for rent at the same price point. If I'm a rational couple with a child or 2, and I'm spending $2,100 to $2,200 a month, what can I get in your community other than renting one of the apartments from Steve Santolo? Well, it turns out in a listing just last night, as a matter of fact, I double-checked it. Within this price point, I can get either a townhome or an apartment within a Victorian, older structure that had 3 or 4 units in it, that you'd actually have access to a yard. 2-bedroom in that configuration, I have 4 under $1,500, 3 under $1,700, 4 under $1,900. So I've got 11 units currently available in the community that if I were a rational parent with a child, would provide a much better lifestyle and a place for me to live in a 2-bedroom. And in fact, I can find a 3-bedroom, single-family detached home, not a lot of them, but there are some, 1 at $2,100, 1 at $2,200, and 3 at $2,500. So I can actually get a 3-bedroom home for only a couple $100 more than a 2-bedroom apartment is going to cost me in rental in this community. Essentially, people who are deciding to live in this amenity-rich community are accepting much smaller living spaces and elevator service in order to get the really cool workout space. I can't think of the right word, sorry. A gym and the patio that you can go out to, the swimming pool, the enclosed area, the chance for a cool single to meet another cool single. All of these things are the kinds of things that people are buying with their money rather than a larger unit and access to a yard that are exactly the kinds of things that a family would be looking for. So given that the experience of 2 of the 3 developers in the community is consistent with the data, 1 outlier, and there's availability of other opportunities, what I did was set a range to be conservative in the fiscal impact statement, that I would use a number 4 times higher than the TOD, which is half of the state, basically cutting the baby in half between the TOD number and the state number for suburban areas that you would see as the rational mark. I think I'm being very conservative in doing that, given what we see here in the data. I think I could have stood before you and said 2.3 and really held there, but frankly, it isn't worth it. So I've got a range of 29.8 to 36.7 is where I think is a very safe place to go with the data. So based on that, one more piece of background data. This is table 3 and 4 earlier in the report. And in addition to talking about school kid generation, we've got to talk a little bit about capacity. Basically what we're seeing, I would say in the rest of the state, here perhaps with a delay, is that the tail is passing. We had the baby boom. Most of us were part of it. We understand that there was this huge population surge. There's a baby boom echo that was when the baby boomers decided to have households and have kids. It's a little bit bigger. Sometimes people call it Gen Y or the millennials for a segment of it. Basically, there are more of them than there were of the baby boom, but it's a little bit more spread out. But the tail of that baby boomlet, the kids of the baby boom, is now passing. In most of the rest of the state, that's in high school, and the class sizes below that are dropping dramatically. You can see on the top of that chart, statewide, the peak was in 05, 06. And since then, statewide, we've lost 25,000 students enrolled in schools between 2005, 2006, and the 13-14 school year, at a time when the state was adding 237,000 in population, which shows we've had a fairly dramatic reduction in overall school enrollment statewide. That's not happening in Metuchen. So that leads me as an analyst to scratch my head and say, okay, how come you guys are different? And the answer is on the bottom of table 4. If you start at the beginning of the period in 98, 99, you're at 14.2% ratio of enrollment to population, while the state's up at 15.29. As a couple of people, as I was interviewing in town, expressed this to me, so forgive me for the language, this is others, Metuchen got old. Everybody essentially had bought in at an earlier period, the post-war period. At the earlier part of this decade, as the century was turning, this community had gotten really old. There were a lot of empty nesters in single-family houses, and over the last decade, that's turned over. What's essentially happened by the time you get to 2013, 2014, is that you now have parity with the state. You've come up, you're a little bit like a tenth or two ahead. So essentially that process of repopulating your neighborhoods has occurred over the last decade. So you've seen enrollment growth from that. but that's not likely to continue. You've now caught up to the average. You're where you should be for neighborhoods to be turning over on a more organic basis. So that source of growth really ought to be at an end at this point. Now, I also laid out for you on Table 3 the enrollment by grade for the last 10, 12 years. What is key in the last year is this bulge. In third grade, you have 183 kids, fourth grade, 176, fifth grade, 179, sixth, 173. And you'll see that they're significantly higher than the rest of the grades. The other grades are all below 150. So as this community has experienced this particular bulge coming through, it's when classes needed to be added at Campbell. And as some of the school district folks said, when they get to middle school, we're going to have some thinking to do. Now, in terms of the forms they send to Trenton, there's plenty of capacity for them and for the kids that we're adding. But it does require rethinking and reprogramming of space as this bulge works its way through your system. You'll also see that for the last 3 years, the first grade enrollments, the first year enrollments in first grade have been diminishing. So Metuchen is starting to see the experience of the rest of the state. The tail has moved through, you've got this bulge that happened because of the demographic turnover, and now we're starting to see the normal pattern coming back into play. The first grade entry for the last 3 years is diminishing, and that would be expected to continue based on overall demographic factors. We think we're still going to see decreases in overall school children in the state as a ratio. You've caught up on the overall enrollment to population ratio. You've got this bulge working its way through. But in overall capacity, adding our students is not going to in any way oversaturate or fill your school. We were able to confirm that with the officials within the school district. So we're good for this project. It fits the pattern that we see. We've drilled down all the way to classroom sizes and figured this out. For this particular project, it's going to work. So we get to table 11, which is the results. Mr. Santolo actually addressed this. This is probably what I could have stood up, said, and went away. It's $54 million in a new rateable. About $1.3 million a year in real estate taxes to the county, municipality, and school district. $856,000 to the schools. Now, even if I'm a complete idiot and got everything wrong in terms of school-age children generation, at $156,000 going to the school, at just under $7,000 per student as the marginal cost of a new student, we could actually generate 130 kids to get to break even. So there may be some debate about exactly how many school-age kids this project is going to generate. There's no way in the world it's going to generate enough kids for it to be negative in terms of its financial impact on the school district. This is a positive. The only question is, how big is the positive? If you talk about adding an extra or removing one, it is very clearly a strong positive. Even if I'm a complete idiot and it's twice what I said it was, you're still ahead of the game. Two more things worth pointing out. As Mr. Santolo said, there's the land sale of $6 million, not to be forgotten. And also, you'll see a line there for first year, partial year assessment. There's a neat trick in New Jersey. When a new rateable comes online, the county gets its share, but the school district doesn't. The municipality gets that money. The way it works is the assessed value of your community at the beginning of the year is determined. What the school district is going to be paid is based on a tax rate applied to that. And the new ratables that pay partial year assessments during the year are not due the school district. They get to be kept by the municipality. So assuming that Mr. Santolo gets COs generally evenly through a year, or you convince him to do it earlier in the year and not take COs in December, the municipality gets a larger partial year assessment the more months there are in that particular year. So 569 is based on a 6-month average as to when COs are issued. And the reason why this money is so magic is it's money you get to spend outside of the cap. This is essentially found money municipalities get to refurbish playgrounds, buy bulletproof vests, do the things you really want to do outside of cap limitations. So that's one of the things that growth can give you that just increasing values will never do. In terms of the balance, as I said, the other half of this analysis, and I won't spend anywhere near as much time because I don't think it's controversial. is how much money you assume a new resident costs. For the borough, when I take out administrative costs, board costs, things that are not going to change as population comes in, you're spending on a marginal basis about $436 per resident on things like public works, emergency services, the kinds of things that would increase in cost as population increases. Using that number, you're getting a positive balance of $45,000 a year, even assuming additional costs. And again, that's a hugely conservative number because, as Mr. Santola said to you, as a rental community, most of the things that the government might be paying for in terms of services, he's already paying for as the landlord, and he's not entitled to reimbursement the way condos are. So I've essentially done this as if it were a condo in terms of costs. I could really have halved that and said your balance is higher, but there's no reason to gild the lily. So I think this is a very conservative number, but clearly it's a very positive number for the municipality. The school district did the same thing. If you take out buildings and administration, the actual classroom costs, books, teachers, are about $6,550 per student. Using the low population generation, you're at $661,000 a year positive, high $616. So even going to my high, you're not taking much of a hit. As I said, on an $800,000 revenue, you can take a much bigger hit than even what I'm suggesting. So there's lots of room. If I'm wrong, this is clearly going to be positive for the community. That's it on the fiscal. So I'm going to turn to the planning issues. There were a couple of loose ends to tie together. Most of this is going to be based on the testimony that you've heard from the experts in each of their own fields. Architect, landscape architect, traffic. They've all addressed each of these issues, and all I'm going to do is remind you of them and how they relate to some of the performance standards that are set forth. As I said, there are a couple of loose ends. With regard to the residential site improvement standards, Carl, as a traffic engineer, went about it in a very practical way, and I think what he said is absolutely true. I went about it in more of a planner, legalistic way. Here's the book, where do I find it? It's actually true. At page 33, and a drawing of it on page 45 of the 2013 edition of Residential Site Improvement Standards, that a multifamily court of less than 300 feet is not required to have a bulb at the end anyway. So even without considering this as a driveway to the garage, there is a street classification within RSIS that applies to the condition that we have here. A multifamily development can have a court less than 300-foot drive-in, no bulb required. So the bulb is whatever we want to do from a design point of view to make it functional and fun, but there is no relief required for that. There is, in fact, a street which is applicable. The second thing with regard to the residential site improvement standards is parking. We have provided testimony to you through the engineer that even using table 4.4 to do the multiplication and come up with a very high number fits on the site. What I would suggest to you, Mr. Renat, is that we would ask the board for a finding that parking is adequate under 5:21-4.14C and E. C talks to the board using its knowledge of the conditions in the neighborhood, and E talking about the context of shared parking and off-track parking resources, that we have indeed provided parking that will be adequate for this use. Whether that squeezes out others or not is an entirely different issue, but we have provided through the mechanisms that have been presented to you adequate parking for the residential component of this development through these particular requirements. By making that finding, we don't run into trouble if somebody says, well, that's on a different lot, it's owned by somebody else. It doesn't matter. You found, based on these two provisions, that we've provided adequate parking for the conditions that we have here on the site. And from the testimony that you've heard from others, I think that the standard has been addressed. In terms of height, our architect testified about average height. Your ordinance actually goes to the worst condition at a particular spot on the building. So I just want to reassure you, the west building, the height limitation is 50 feet, and we're at 49.9. The east is 65 feet, and we're at 59 feet. So we are under, our worst condition complies with your height regulation. There is not a height variance necessary and just clean up that our architect talked in terms of averages. There's one other. Yes, thank you. I'll get to that in a minute then. Let me turn then to the planning findings. Your ordinance is interestingly structured in that it has performance criteria that we need to address as if we were both a plan development and a conditional use. You really can't be both at the same time, but your ordinance refers to both of those kinds of languages. So let me go through those relatively briefly. Mr. Constantine has outlined these, has typed them all up individually in his review letter of July 11th, 2014. So I'm going to refer to the sections, and I think the last thing you need is for me to read his paragraph and then just tell you that I agree.
So these are the recommendations that Mr. Constantine has?
They're not recommendations, it's simply regurgitating the ordinance. The ordinance says we must find this, we must find this.
Okay.
It's the approval procedure in the front.
Right. Okay. So on page 2, item number 3, is compliance with section 110-91F bracket A, which are the findings for a plan development. There are 5 of them. The first is A, is very simple. We have no departures. Under the plan development procedures, there is a unique kind of relief that we can ask from the board. It's very powerful. It's almost like a use variance, if you will. We're not doing it. You've adopted an ordinance. We're complying with that ordinance, so there are no departures. B is that the maintenance of open space is done appropriately. You had extensive testimony, and I think Mr. Renaud summarized it very well last evening, that this is going to be subject to the governing body of the borough in the developer's agreement as a condition of approval that will iron out who's going to own it, who's going to maintain it, so that the provisions will be adequate through that condition. The third is the physical design. As I said, this is a situation in which the plan development is not a developer of 50 acres saying, here I am, I've invented something. This is where you guys have worked very hard in creating a planning background and a specific ordinance, and we are complying with that ordinance. By those steps, we do meet this standard automatically, essentially, by having followed that particular process, which isn't always the case in a plan development. D is the important one, and this is sort of the, we really didn't mean it category. That you have to find that we're not creating an unreasonably adverse impact on the neighborhood. That even after we went through all of this and complied with everything you wanted us to do, that if we had an unreasonably negative impact on the neighborhood, you could say, never mind. I would suggest to you that that would be inappropriate. That what we have done here is fulfilled the thrust of everything that you guys have been working on. You heard from Keith and Tom in very detailed testimony about the quality of the design, materials, relationship of everything that's occurring on the site to the perimeter, that we are not creating adverse impacts. We are, in fact, improving the neighborhood in which we are a part, and we have fulfilled the conditions and requirements of your ordinance, which would prevent the creation of an unreasonably adverse impact. The last one is phasing. You heard a great deal of testimony last night on the phasing issue.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Which number are you on here? I'm sorry. I'm looking at the memo.
Page 2, number 3, letter D.
Actually, on page 3D, right?
Yes. I'm sorry, yeah, flip over. Page 3.
Page 3.
That was page 3. Could you say that again, please?
Paragraph D. At the top.
It starts on 2, goes over to page 3.
It goes over to 3.
And this is item D on page 3.
Correct.
At the top
Thank
of
you.
it. So we're physically together. Okay? All right. The last one is phasing, and again, this is one that Mr. Renaud addressed by having as a condition of approval the developer's agreement that will be addressing the construction phasing, not necessarily related to parking phasing, but construction phasing on the site. So the provisions to protect the public interest related to phasing are being met and delivered through that condition and ultimately through the developer's agreement. The next set of these are on number 2 on page 2, coming forward.
And I will say for you, for the sake of brevity, you can just say that you agree with specific sections without having to elaborate.
That was exactly what I was going to say, as a matter of fact. These are all met or we wouldn't be here. These were essentially conditions that the board had to find we met in order for this application to proceed. They're all dimensional. Next. General conditions is 110-86. 91 was actually our district, 86 takes us back into the general conditions. And this is the first set from A through H. They carry over from page 1 to page 2.
We're going backwards for everyone who's paying attention.
Yes, sir. Well, and I guess I should apologize for that, but as a planner, I did them in order of importance.
It's quite all right.
And the planning development ones were
Backwards to go forwards, it's all good.
much more significant. And I'll be very brief. In terms of natural resources, there weren't any, and we're creating them. We're reducing impervious surfaces, adding plantings. Those parapets will be great for birds. There will be natural resources in the future. There aren't now. That's a good one. B, C, D, and E, Mr. Pankey addressed in his testimony. This is circulation, both pedestrian and vehicular. I'll simply say I agree with everything he said and not repeat all of that. I think you've heard a lot of testimony, not only from Mr. Pankey, but also from Tom about the plaza and the area around it. A great deal of attention has been paid on these issues. And this is essentially the heart of the application. F is again getting back to physical, visual and spatial relationships to the neighborhood. This is an application that's worked very hard to be connected to the neighborhood in which it's in. I think you can find very comfortably that that's been met. G is buffers and screening. None is necessary or required in this particular application. This general conditional use goes to all kinds of things, gas stations and other kinds of noxious uses. We're not one of those and don't need buffers and screening. However, you can say that as Mr. Santolo said in the opening, they're very experienced in building structures adjacent to trains, in keeping the vibration and noise from being a disturbance to their residents. And the good news is their buildings then wind up serving as a buffer to the rest of the neighborhood. We've seen that in a number of communities where all of a sudden you don't hear the noises that you used to hear when these buildings are there. So I think that's a positive as well. And H is the adequacy of landscaping and lighting. I think that was addressed last night by both Keith and Tom. I would simply say that I agree with them. My conclusion in going through all three of these sets of standards is that we are at the end of a very long process. Assuming you decide to go forward with an approval, you're getting to the point where you're going to see delivery on these issues that you've been working on now for quite some time. I suggest to you that what you've now received in terms of the level of effort and work that's gone into it is something that deserves the work that you've put into it for all those years. So I would suggest to you that this is a positive in terms of planning on all of the various specific aspects that we've gone through, and I'll stop there. Thank you. That's what you have me.
Craig, if you can just quickly, last evening there was testimony regarding the public plaza, or public piazza as it's been described, and at the time it was called, I believe, a town green. And can you share for the record whether or not we're talking about the same space, the public piazza?
Yes, and I promised I would do it, and I didn't. I'm bad. Going back to planning findings B, that the maintenance of open space, that the provisions that have been done are appropriate. Under your ordinance, the language has been tweaked from the beginning till now. One of our experts used the language from one of the older versions of the ordinance. We are in fact talking about the public plaza. Jim assures me that piazza is simply Italian for plaza. We're talking about the same thing, different language. And it's that particular space that all of the testimony from both the architect and landscape architect was meant to be addressing.
Jim, can you just speak to whether there's anything from pages 3 to pages 11 on your memo that Mr. Rainkamp should have dealt with that he didn't, or was it all covered in other testimony? Is there anything you want to ask him about that he hasn't answered in regards to your memo?
No, I would like to also, on the last point that he just raised, I also had the old ordinance language, town green, in my memo, so it is public plaza is the common open space, but I have no other issues for him related to anything in my...
Okay, good. All right, then I'm going to open up to the board to ask questions for Mr. Rainkamp. If you have any questions based on his testimony, now would be the time to ask them.
You said that Mr. Josel's property had how many children for 2 bedrooms?
He was reporting a ratio of 1 school child for every other 2-bedroom unit. I didn't get the count of
A half per unit?
half per unit.
Okay.
And which properties were those? You cited 3.
That was Suburban Square. But I don't have the exact number of how many two-bedrooms there were, so I can't tell you how many kids it was, but it was a rate of .5. I was quite surprised by that.
Would you have that information?
I actually think it's in his Amboy Avenue property, which is near the corner of Lake. It's above a childcare center. There's some office space on the ground floor, and there's a few apartments above.
And we're getting 2 children.
There's some, my understanding from talking to Mr. Giselle is that there's school children just in the past year or two for the first time in those 2-bedroom apartments.
But there's how many 2-bedroom apartments?
I'm not sure.
Okay. But we're getting .5
It's a half.
children per 2-bedroom apartment.
Right, and all the other 2-bedroom apartments downtown, Mr. Tilbur's, Mr. Berger's, 0.
Unless it's a family that, I don't want to use.
Temporary housing.
That's using it as temporary housing while they're either waiting for a house to be sold or closed or remodeling.
That was what he reported. And what I would also say, what I didn't hear from any of them, and it's typically a story that occurs in municipalities, is when divorce strikes a family and the non-custodial spouse gets an apartment, winds up with the child. That happens a lot as well. So I don't want to say that these are the only circumstances in which you will ever see a school-age child. There are other family stories that will evolve over time, but the numbers stay very low.
Okay. Other questions?
Question.
Reed?
These recommendations, so I'm assuming that the applicant is agreeing upon all of these recommendations?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Other questions from board members?
Read, that's in my memo.
Okay. All right, then I'm going to open up to the public. If you have questions specifically for this witness regarding his rendering of the fiscal data, come on up and tell us your name, address, and ask your question. Okay, I see none. I'm going to close the public portion for this witness. Thank you. We are at 10 minutes to 10, and I know that we've been at this for 2 hours, so I'm going to have a 10-minute recess, and then we can regroup and close this application. 5 to 10 minutes, whoever makes it up there first. Everybody back in less than a minute. We'll get started, and Ms. Mazaway, maybe you want to pick up where we left off.
Well, I want to thank the board. Our direct testimony is concluded now. We've done all of our witness. We do want to clarify one matter out of Mr. Constantine's planning memo had to do with the fair share contribution.
Yeah, just briefly, he had, I think, echoed the major request on the fair share of stormwater, and we would continue to
take exception with that, as we did with the Mazer recommendation yesterday when we put our rationale on the
just to
record.
the question of agreeing all the conditions in the report. So all but that.
So which memo are we referring to?
This is,
The
Mr.
July 11, 2014?
Okay, and which,
Item, I think it's 4.6 on the off track. Is that what you're?
That's correct.
That's the one.
So I didn't use.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't use the term fair share. That was in Lisa's memo.
But that you were referring to the same point, yes?
Yes.
So we would continue our exception.
One question on that item, 4.6, was mentioning the burying of overhead utility lines on Pearl Street and Lake Avenue. I don't know that that was ever addressed in testimony. You know, it's something you've been exploring?
The current existing overhead utility lines?
Yes.
I believe in the engineer's letter, it was requested that we make efforts to reach out to the utilities to see whether that's a possibility.
Right. We have been exploring it, and we will continue to.
Okay.
Very good.
And just to clarify, because Jim, your memorandum has several recommendations that seem kind of open-ended or require a response from the applicant. Was it the testimony that the applicant agrees to
It was.
all of the specificity in your memorandum except for this one section?
That's what they're saying.
That's what they said.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
And
Did you
Mr.
want
Chair,
to-
I'd like to just reserve my closing until after all comments have been put in.
I didn't know if you wanted to, well, I guess that would make sense.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Under 5.13 on page 7, it states, and this is Jim's letter, it is our understanding that the borough will be responsible for purchasing any movable tables and chairs. And I thought that that was still something that we were dealing with in terms of responsibility for maintenance of the piazza, et cetera.
Well, I think there was when Tom Carmen presented last night, there was a question. He talked about movable chairs and tables. My understanding is the applicant does not want to purchase those, but what I've recommended is that they give us some manufacturer's specs, and that the borough then, gets samples out there. And I personally feel that this is the town's public space, and that you want to buy good tables and chairs, and I'd rather see the borough put the samples and let the public actually sample them and maybe even vote on the 3 finalists, and you go from there and do it right. They're going to be the public's furniture and the public space.
How many of you are you talking about?
You need, you don't need to start with all of them, but I could get you some numbers and counts from similar-sized spaces, and...
Well, you do understand that this is going to have an impact on our budget, and it could be considerable.
Could be, but...
It's something that the council should be in consideration of.
Yeah, my viewpoint would be if there's a few tables and chairs, and then when there's a concert or something, just like now, people bring their lawn chairs, all right? I could see having, 4 or 5 tables and chairs out, tables and then some chairs around it. But are we talking hundreds, or are we talking?
You're probably talking about a dozen to 2 dozen tables and, chairs to fill around that, a couple dozen chairs.
Now, are we talking about tables and chairs in the area behind the planter, I guess you'd call it, where the food establishments would be, or?
No, those are provided by, if there's cafe seating, that's their responsibility, the establishments. These are the key to public spaces, to have movable chairs and tables. You've heard testimony, people like to track the sunlight or follow the shade, set their own groupings. There's the Project for Public Spaces, has ample literature. It's a key. There's minimal benching and fixed seating, but you need the movable chairs and tables. Okay. So I was originally recommending the applicant provide those, but they've indicated that they do not want to.
I don't know if this is the appropriate time to talk about this, but I would suggest that in discussions concerning the provision of electricity to the piazza, that our METV coordinator be included in those discussions. I know that he has a great deal of expertise in that area, and maybe be invaluable input to you, particularly should our television station wish to televise any type of event there, which they do, that are now held on the senior citizens parking lot.
We'll have to go out and get some, I think, some specific expertise as well to help us understand all the needs.
But I would just suggest that you include him in that too, so that we don't run into a situation later on where we're trying to cable stuff.
Understood.
No, seems reasonable. But Bob, I just want to ask you, in terms of protocol and what we have left, what order would you like things to go in?
I think that what we should do is hear from the public, have the public comment portion at this time. Then, as council indicated, let her sum up, and then the board would discuss the application. So I think that's the most expeditious procedure.
So, for those of you who have been waiting, who not necessarily to ask questions, but you can still ask questions, but want to make comments, we're going to open it up to the public. You can come up to the microphone, give us your name and address, and give us your comments. Okay, Mr. Salmon, I see him coming.
And at this point, because everybody's going to make comments, I'm going to ask everybody who comes up to be sworn in, because we're going to probably have a mix of opinions and perhaps facts, so I'm going to ask that everybody be sworn. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you are about to give in this proceeding shall be the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. Bill Simon, 23 Bounty Street. I'd like to thank the applicant and their professionals for a nice presentation, and I'd like to thank the board and our professionals for their input, time and input on this application, and I hope you vote in favor for the application. I think it's a benefit to the town. I think we need foot traffic on our main street, and I think this will do the trick. That being said, I hope that you condition the application with the following conditions. One being that they agree to the fair share off-site improvements that Lisa indicated in her report, and anything that Jim may have in his report with regard to fair share. And if you can, if you have the ability, tie the residential C of Os to the parking deck C of O, the shell on the retail construction, and again, the fair share, whether that's paid per unit or how it's done, tie it to the CO. So we make sure we get everything we need along with the residential, along with the deck. We get the plaza all in the proper timing. And I don't know, did I indicate the retail? You can't fit out the retail, I understand that. But if we can get that standalone retail tied to a residential CO, I think that would be great for the town. Thank you very much. Again, thank the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Salmon. Other members of the public? Okay, we have one more. We're going to swear.
I hereby
Will you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give in this proceeding shall be the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. All right, Crystal Asmore, over there on Halsey Street. I just want to say that all these projections sound really good and stuff, but in Obama's new America, people are forced to work only part-time. Most people are actually on disability and collecting food stamps, which I'm sure that we know a large population are. This population exists in Metuchen also. So what I was gleaming from this is the shared parking thing. So why I do not think, how do you know residents are leaving at 9 a.m. and you can share the parking space? If indeed that is what you are saying. Like everybody's going to work at 9 a.m.? Everybody has a job now? I think we should take it into consideration that we still have the same president in office, and things may not change that soon. That's all I have to say this, because I am actually here on another issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Other residents who would like to share their comments?
So swearing, not signing, right?
Yes, but you're going to sign also, because
Okay.
you haven't signed before. So let's do the swearing first, if you wouldn't mind. You swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give in this proceeding shall be the truth and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Okay,
I
and would
swear.
you state your full name and
Okay.
address?
All right. Tyreen Reuter, 16 Durham Avenue. And I had a question about the public plaza. Just keep trying to use the word piazza here, but, and how exactly that's working. I've heard that, and I think I heard during the meeting last night, that the plaza is going to be a public space, right? And I know that, like, out in the lobby, we have the check about the Middlesex County open space. So I was just kind of curious as to the management of the plaza, piazza, and as my husband brought up, and I feel very strongly for different reasons, about making accommodations for families and seniors and children that are going to be visiting in order to have some kind of restroom or access to it. I'm not talking about 24 hours and something that we can always get into, but, you know, right now for the farmers market and for the senior center, when we have the Arts Council concerts there, we use the senior center. And for anybody who goes to those Thursday evening concerts in August, they know that the restroom facilities and being able to wash your hands is really indispensable for families and seniors. And one thing that it really does is it encourages people to walk to this space. For those of people in town that have children that go to Olmeser Park, we all drive to the park, because if you have a child that's either potty training or under 10, you know, you're not going to be able to walk back the 10 or so blocks if the need arises for them. And the same thing is true for pregnant women. Pretty much any but non-healthy adults are, you know, affected by that. So it's not something that people like to talk about, is the bathroom, but I think that it is a very important thing, that even if perhaps it's an arrangement with the cafe that's there, that at least people don't feel like they're begging a business or imposing upon them. For the farmer's market, the way it is now, the businesses in the area kind of allow the vendors to go in and wash up and use the restroom, and same thing for the shoppers. And I think it's kind of unfair to expect the businesses to do that. And I'm wondering if the open space money, or how that works with the borough owning it, are we going to have control over, what actually happens there and facilities? Or is that something we're going to rely upon the cafe, I guess is what's planned for the ring of that to happen? So that's kind of my question.
Mr. Santelli, you want to speak to that at all?
Sure. I think a public bathroom is a horrible idea, no matter who pays for it or whatever. To your point about when they're open is the biggest issue, because people think they're going to be open and then they're not open. And you put them on a timer and the timer doesn't work. We have this at our sports fields in my community. The pipes froze last winter. Frankly, they're a mess most of the time because little kids, it's not like folks in Metuchen don't know how to clean up. Little kids end up using them. Who's going to clean it up? You get teenagers who leave the water running, clog the drain. It's causing, and I hear you, that it would be great if there was a great, clean, warm, nice bathroom that you could use. But the problems
like we have at
that
the senior
stem
center.
from that- The problems that stem from that are so great that I think if you have a little one, you jump into one of the restaurants and you go, just like if you went to the parade in New York City or whatever, or you take care of what you need to take care of before it leaves to come. Because I can't imagine, honestly, where you put them, who monitors them, who maintains them, and how you keep all of these vandals and all that situation under control. It's really almost impossible, and it's unfair to ask the borough to do it, it's unfair to ask the parking authority to do it, and frankly unfair to ask us to do it.
Okay, but it's not unfair to the businesses to ask them to, and I guess I'm giving as an example how the senior center works on Thursday nights. I don't know that we've ever had any vandalism during the Arts Council concerts. And I'm not expecting something to be open all the time. No, the concerts happen outside, we go inside to use it. Yeah.
But there's you're talking about actually taking retail spaces and creating an alcove and into then a public restroom. Now you're talking about, 1,500, 2,000 square feet of rentable space.
Well, that's why I guess my question is about the public space and whose that is. Because, like I said, it is a problem for the parks. And it is, as a mother, do you leave the house without a diaper bag? No. Do you make allowances for that. And what you end up doing is driving, or you end up not staying. And if you don't want people to linger there you have it. But if you want it to be a truly public space, like I said, I'm not saying that it necessarily has to be some fully accessible outdoor type of thing, but not to be able to wash hands while you're sitting there playing or listening to music. Like you said, again, children, seniors, people walking by. I understand that there's problems with, crime and all that stuff.
But they will have to be handicap accessible. So you'll have to have oversized stalls, wide doors, you'll have to be able to turn appropriately, but you'll have to be able to turn it. I can't believe as a father of 2 kids, I'm arguing against bathrooms, but you just don't see public bathrooms in any of these spaces for a good reason. They're impossible to maintain. You talk about the restaurant, if there's a cafe there or a Starbucks or whatever, there's staff, they clean the bathroom every 40 minutes.
Well, and if there's something that can be arranged.
Let me just interject for a minute. We really, this
All right,
is
I'm
the
sorry.
time for you to make a statement. We already had testimony, and everybody asked their questions and so forth, and this was really all covered extensively last night, so we don't want to rehash the whole
Okay,
thing. So
I only heard a couple
whatever
of
statements,
snippets
please.
about that last night, so, okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Other members of the public?
Can I make a comment on that?
You can.
I actually agree somewhat, what the resident is referring to, that, going back to the recommendation 5.9, we're looking to have open-air movies, concerts, et cetera. Families with small children, if they're there 2.5 hours, would need somewhere to go. So I'm not saying exactly where that would be, but I think it should be for
Well, again, I'm going to defer to Mr. Borth since he's the person who's got responsibility. Is that something, Mr. Borth, that you would like to have responsibility for the borough?
I believe you know the answer to that question. I'd like to hear what our planner's thoughts are on this. I mean, I understand the questions, and I do feel that we should consider somehow making some kind of accommodation for the instances that Mrs. Reuter talks about. And I also understand the difficulties with maintaining public restrooms. But if we want people to walk to this piazza, if we want our town to be pedestrian-friendly, we can't expect people to come from blocks away and then go to a venue that lasts maybe an hour or two and not have some accommodation.
So are you proposing a temporary based on the function or a permanent?
I'd like to hear what our planner has to say, he has more experience with these open spaces than certainly I do.
Okay, Jim.
Yeah, certainly when a public space reaches a certain scale and has a certain intensity of use, and when you're into, I'll say, city-scale spaces, you reach a point where you have a need for public bathrooms. But having something that's accessible to the public, that you know is there, but that isn't a public restroom, I think is the solution here. I think one possibility could be, for instance, in the single-story commercial space, if a bathroom were located in an area where it might serve more than one business, but also had accessibility only during business hours, that might provide the bathroom that people need, but it's still serving businesses. And you see sometimes in commercial spaces, to deal with some of the cost efficiencies of accessible bathrooms. You see them in a shared condition between more than one business use, and it sort of falls into this semi-public, semi-private, hallway area or area in between. So I think there may be a creative solution that doesn't create a public bathroom that the borough's responsible for, and I don't think you're going to, I think that has a series of complications given a whole series of other issues, but there may be a way of having the bathrooms that are going to be there anyway for the businesses be a little more accessible.
Like a shopping mall.
Jim, I think an idea of that isn't Mimi's restaurant like that? The bathroom was
Yes.
off to the side because it used to service Mimi's and the
Correct.
fish store.
Is there a way then that we can attempt to ensure that whoever moves in as a tenant creates that kind of...
I think we have to ask the applicant if that's what we want.
Sort of shared facility that's there, but it's really not there in terms of the public? Because I can see, and when we've had this in other areas in town, that we're going to be, as a municipality, put upon to provide something. And that something, I would hope, would not be a porta-john. Because I think that's going to degrade what we're trying to do here. So I don't know that I have a solution, but I think that we should at least consider having a mechanism to have that kind of
Well,
shared
no, I think
solution.
you've hit it. I mean, if we don't want a porta-john and we don't want a public bathroom that we're responsible for, then it relies on the creativity and the idea of making a common space restroom that more than one retail use might be the creative way to do that.
Yeah, I don't think it's that different than what you often find in a larger department store where they're in these sort of hallway areas that are also servicing. It's clearly there for the store, but it also serves a little broader public function, but it still has a maintenance that's built in by taken care of by the retail.
My concern is we're going to have these... I'm sorry.
No, I'm wondering if the applicant is amenable to something along those lines.
I would gladly be amenable if these tenants were located and we knew what was going to happen there. But we don't know. And to hamstring the marketing by telling somebody, by the way, you got to have a public bathroom as part of your space or an access corridor, isn't going to help us market the retail. We have 24 pages of requests and recommendations to which we've agreed to every single one.
I understand.
Except for 3 things. And if you go to walkable communities like Summit or Montclair, They don't have public bathrooms. I appreciate where you're all coming from. It would be great if you had a public bathroom.
Oh, we're not asking for a public bathroom. I think we're asking for is a shared space.
Well, but that's a public bathroom. If I have to tell a tenant that anybody who comes in to use the bathroom, no matter how many kids they have and how covered with mud they are and everything else, they have to be able to use the bathroom.
But I don't think that's what you're saying, Jim. What you're saying is the design facilitates that, right? It's not that we're going to expressly allow or forbid anything. We're saying that if the design could be such that people could do that, but it wouldn't be an encumbrance on any of the businesses with creative design, would you be, well, let me put it this way, would you expressly forbid the idea, or would you be open to at least considering it?
No, depending on the unit mix, to the extent we can incorporate a corridored bathroom that would be multiply shared by tenants, we would definitely do that.
I think that's all the board's asking for. That's all.
So,
As long as it's not compelled, we'll, as we're coming up with retail plans, we'll try, and like you said, it may actually work if 3 tenants can share a bathroom. But
Yeah, and
the devil's in the details, because a lot of those bathrooms pre-exist all the handicap codes and everything.
And I think that's all we're asking for is an open mind, and again, we've got some good professionals who are very creative, and so long as you don't expressly forbid it, then there's the possibility that we might come up with a creative solution.
We will absolutely try and accomplish.
I appreciate that.
of course, you know,
Couldn't the
the borough always has the possibility of putting porta-johns in front of the commercial tenants in the event of public space. So I think there's, I think we got a little,
Business-friendly Metuchen. What
bathroom-friendly.
As you always say, Jim, there's a rational nexus, and I think it's there.
I
I think we'll find a way.
I think also, though, you know, I can appreciate the maintenance issue, because I walk past the train station, we have the bus stops and the benches, and there's always kind of litter, and that's a simple enclosure, public enclosure, and it's difficult to maintain. So I think the maintenance issue is a major one. I just think we have to, you know.
Yeah, no, public bathrooms are out. I don't
That
think
as
that's what
well.
we're proposing. I think we're going in a different direction. Okay, other members of the public? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the public portion, and I'm going to ask Ms. Mazaway to complete her summary, and then, counsel, you can take us after there.
Eric, I just had a couple of other.
I apologize,
issues,
Jim.
And I didn't want to come in after she closes, so.
Good idea.
All right, so bathrooms off the list.
It's on the list.
There was an issue brought up relating to the piazza and the landscape size, and one of the things that might address the comment that came from the board is, since the trees in the center of the piazza in the back are going to be in tree wells, not in the tree grates up in the street, it's possible that those could be increased slightly in size, or that the planter areas could be, to try to get a little bit more mix. There's an intent in Mr. Carmen's plans to have those be slightly larger.
That we agree.
But they could increase perhaps by another inch or two by just resizing the, I have a feeling actually there's room to do it now, so that we could get a little bit size. That's relatively minor on that. I also wanted to make sure we had a provision that allowed for, that understood that there may be banners for the piazza and sort of signage related to that. That was never really discussed in any of this. And then another item that we had discussed last week, but it didn't make it into my memo, is that within the materials there, we're going to look at exploring incorporation of the Main Street bricks that we're using in our sidewalk system, as well as some level of granite, which was in Woodmont's original proposal. We talked about the curbing around the planter areas.
We agreed to
Or maybe some small cobbles. Okay, so that's minor. That clears up the...
Is that in your memo, Jim?
Those aren't, that's why I'm mentioning those now.
This is
It's a public bathroom.
It wasn't.
All right, so I'm not clear on what it is. Can you, I don't need it now, but can you
Yeah,
give
he-
me a
we're fine. He agreed to
note
it.
on what it is?
They agreed to it
At
all.
some point, I'll incorporate in a resolution if
Sure.
the board's so inclined.
And then there was one last issue that came up from several board members as well as the public, which was the units, the apartment units facing New Street, and how to deal with that. And there's certainly in items 6.4 and 6.5 of my memo, there were a number of design requirements, really attempting to try to deal with the fact that you go from public storefronts, and then all of a sudden you hit some wall, private areas, transition, second building, and so I throw this out for consideration. And I think the issue that was brought up, that several board members asked to try to get addressed was, could there be some flexibility that perhaps the portion of the ground floor portion of the building facing New Street, could have commercial potential, not be created as commercial space. So I'd like to recommend for consideration that we add a condition that just indicates that the ground floor apartments fronting New Street, including the curve wall units at the Lake Avenue intersection, be designed as flex units that could accommodate potential future conversion to business uses. So if they're designed that way, they sort of look a little different. It means there's going to be perhaps a little taller ceiling. Some of them actually already have that, a little bit more transparency, provision that you could have signage if that occurs in the future, and then also to allow that any of those ground floor units can also have a flex home office space. There's things that can happen. The one-bedroom units could be replaced with two-bedroom units. That second bedroom could actually become that flex home workspace. So it's a way to, and it's a technique that's used. In fact, it was discussed earlier with Woodmont. However, I would recommend that we not have a condition that limits or precludes any of the ground floor units fronting on New Street from being purely apartment. But I think the flexibility was what the board members were looking for, and what the public was looking for, which can be designed in.
I was certainly looking for that.
How would that be triggered, though? How would we then figure out when the time came to flexibly switch them?
That's driven by tenants. So
Yeah,
if people
it's
want to
market.
use them for apartments forever, I'm not saying we preclude that.
But what, they have to come back?
Yeah, how would that work with the
you can-
board?
They
Would
would have to come back and change use.
Change of
No,
use?
I would recommend you deal with it now. You don't want to put those burdens on it, or you'll never, so I think what you're looking for is the flexibility that if and when that occurs.
Well, again, I think the applicant gave testimony that, the market would drive the need and that they would be open to that, but I guess what you're saying is you just want the physical accommodation for the space to be such that that could be possible.
If you design in the flexibility, it can happen. If
So-
you don't design it in,
Then it can't.
it won't.
I think, that one would seem to dovetail.
Object to that, but to be candid with you, we can design it in on the one building that already has the retail because the floor-to-floor heights work. On the other building that doesn't have the retail, obviously, you could make any space retail, but frankly, it wouldn't work particularly well with a 9-foot floor ceiling. Quality retail, wants to be 12, 13 foot meters. But as an office invite or something.
As an office or as an artist studio, it may not be retail. That's the whole thing. I think what they were looking for is some flexibility in that
We will agree.
condition. Okay, fine, thank you, those are my
Well,
only other.
Let me just interject there, that, I think now we're going too far beyond what you could approve, I think, at this point, because it'd be one thing to say you could use it for retail space, but now if we're talking about office, what kind of office are we talking, is it, you're really, I don't know, I think it would be difficult to craft a resolution that could reasonably approve possible uses of office space in the future. Because you're really now opening up to any commercial development. There's a difference if it's retail. I think we could do that, but,
Well, you were saying specifically it would work, right? That's what you were going for?
Well, some
more.
flexibility. I can just tell you, like, for instance, here's an example from Celebration, Florida, where they started as apartments, and what you have there are travel agencies, some small offices, insurance broker. It's low-intensity stuff because the space isn't the right depth for retail.
What
So-
about the
well, let's put it,
Artist
let me
studio,
rethink
low
this. So
intensity.
we're talking about whatever is permitted in the zone, correct? And
Correct.
we
Yeah.
allow
Free use.
ground floor
It's already permitted.
retail. So I guess there's no, I suppose there's no reason why they would have to come back for further site plan approval.
Well, we're fine with that the first floor units would be permitted to be split,
Used for some other retail or commercial use in the zone.
then permitted at the
Yeah.
time.
Right, you have personal service businesses, offices.
It's all there.
Okay.
There you go.
Thank
Let's
you.
keep it simple.
All right.
Okay, Jim, that covers everything you've got. Lisa, how about you?
No, I'm good.
You're good, okay. Board members, are you good? Other questions before we ask
The only concern I had, and I agree with Mr. Salmon about doing something, either if it's with bollards or planters, to bump that out at both Center and Woodmont Way and New and Pearl.
And the applicant's consented to
I'm
that.
thinking that maybe in terms of procedure, can we get the applicant's summation out of the way, and then we could discuss, because I've got a list of conditions and items that
Let's do
you'll want
that
to
then.
discuss that I've picked up, and then you're going to have your own items, but let's get...
Mazui, are you ready?
I am, and I'll be very brief.
Very good.
Because the board has heard a lot of testimony over the last 2 days, and I won't go through the chore of summarizing all of that. In particular, I would do that if perhaps the hearing lasted over a course of several months. But I'm sure it's all fresh in everybody's mind. You did hear from a number of witnesses, both professionals and fact witnesses. But to remind the board, we're seeking a 3-lot subdivision, whereas now on the property there are 5 lots. We're seeking to consolidate those and then subdivide into 3. And our engineer provided testimony with regard to the proposal for that. We are very excited, and I think you could see that through the number of people who came to testify and their passion for this project, that we are very hopeful that the board will vote favorably on this application. We've met all the conditions of the conditional use, and as Mr. Rainkamp put on the record, we've met the conditions of the planned development ordinance as well. If the board has no further questions, we simply would ask that they grant our application in full. And certainly, we'd like to limit any possible conditions that the board puts on that. As Mr. Santola mentioned, we have agreed to just about everything that was asked of us by your planner and the engineer, with the exception of very few things, including that off-track fair share request. In particular, because we're actually reducing the impervious, we're making the site condition here better than what it exists currently in the no-build condition, and therefore think that we've certainly met the standard for not having to provide any fair share for off-track improvements. Otherwise, we would hope that the board would vote favorably on our application this evening, and thank you for your time.
Very good. Bob, you're driving. What's next?
Okay, well, now would be the time for the board to discuss. I would indicate that the public portion of the hearing is closed, and again, it's the time for the board to discuss the application and to eventually vote on it. Let me go over, if I might, for the board what it is being asked to do. So we first got an application for preliminary and final major site plan approval. In essence, the applicant says we have conformed with all the conditions of site plan approval and seek approval, and they're looking for, as I said, preliminary and final. They are also seeking conditional use approval for the PUCD. They allege that they meet the conditions, and I don't believe there's been any testimony to the effect that the conditions have not been met. As you know, there were 4 conditions of the conditional use, and they all appear to have been complied with, but that's a finding that the board will have to make. They've also asked for subdivision approval. They're consolidating, I believe the number was 5 lots, and they are going to subdivide them into 3 lots. The lot which contains the retail and residential portion, the lot which contains the parking deck and the public piazza. So those are the 3 things you're being asked to approve. There was a request, if the board finds that there were any variances required, that they be granted. I don't believe I've heard any testimony to the effect that any variances are required. We've heard a couple of comments along the way of requests for waivers or exceptions, and I will review these. I think just for the board and really more for the public, I should indicate that this application is somewhat different than the way most applications come before the planning board. As a general rule, applications come before the planning board brought by a developer who is somebody who says, I've acquired the right to develop a particular piece of property. There is already zoning in place. The developer either owns or has a contract to own the property, and the developer then comes in with a plan which comes before the board for the first time, or which comes to the board after it goes to the technical review committee. So, in effect, the board reviews those plans and sort of works with the developer and, in effect, helps design, at times at least, helps design the project after determining whether or not it complies with the applicable ordinances. This project comes to the board in a different way. This is a project which was really initiated by the Parking Authority, which sought proposals from developers. It has already been extensively acted upon by the municipality in terms of the zoning by both the governing body in developing the zoning and by the planning board in terms of previously reviewing the zoning. And it's really a project which has been either designed or assisted in the designing of the project by the borough, which is not the way that it comes ordinarily. So what the board's doing in this particular case, as opposed to the way that it handles most applications, is sort of checking off to make sure that what the borough has told the applicant to put on this property is put. So it's a little different application, and so this is a little bit of a different process. So what the board is doing is going through, as I said, a sort of a checklist and making sure that everything that is required to make this project and everything that the borough requested for the project has been included. So, having said that, these are the items or the issues or conditions that I have listed during the course of the hearing that I think that the board needs to either include as conditions or things that you have to discuss. One of them was, there was a request, and you know, these go from important to less important, not more in the order that they came up than in the order of importance. So someone asked if Mr. Santola could score the development on a lead scale. I believe he said that he could, and it's going to be up to the board to determine whether or not you want to require that, and then presumably he would do that and submit it for the review and approval, I would say, of the board's engineer and the planner. We have a request for a waiver or exception for a 5-foot-high construction fence with signage. I'm assuming this is going to be the same kind of fence as was installed in the district, that type of appearance. So whether or not it requires a waiver, in all prudence, it probably should be granted if that's what the board is inclined to do. And I would include the granting of the request for signage on the fencing, again, if that's what the board is inclined to do. We have the issue of the maintenance of the plaza, and I think I've indicated, or if I haven't indicated, I'm going to indicate now, that one of the conditions of the conditional use is the provision of a public plaza. My position, if I were pressed, would be that the maintenance of the public plaza is the obligation of the applicant. I think that the borough and the parking authority and the applicant have agreed that they will work together to come up with a solution to the maintenance issue, and the applicant has agreed that that can be included as part of the developer's agreement, which, as I indicated, is an agreement that is between the applicant and the municipality with respect to how this project is going to be developed and maintained, not only now but into the future. So that should be included, as will be the other conditions and requirements, and I'm not going to specify them all, but they would be things of the nature of, there's been an agreement, for example, that the developer will install utilities, as I understand it, including electric and water in the public facility. I'm not going to ask the board to go through each and every one of those things, but those will be part of the developer's agreement between the developer and the borough as to how that's to be done and so forth. We have a request for a waiver or exception for the size of the parking stalls, and I just want to make sure that I know what the request is. The request is for stalls that are 8 foot 6 inches rather than the 9-foot width that's normally required, and my understanding is that that is not going to be the case on the lower level or levels of the parking deck, but will be the case on the upper levels, which are the ones that are expected to have less frequent trips. And council, do you know, is it just the one lower level, or is it more than one level?
Just one lower
Just
level.
the one level. So the one lower level will have the 9-foot width spaces, and then all of the upper floors would have the 8 foot 6 spaces.
That's correct.
Okay. We have a condition which the developer agreed to give the planner the authority to review and approve the number of bike parking spaces in the deck that the developer proposes. One item that I know has been discussed with the applicant, but I don't think actually, I now realize came in any of the testimony, which is that the fire official has not completely completed his review of all of the features of the deck, and that the approval, generally we have our approvals are subject to all outside agency approvals, which are things like soil conservation. One of the approvals that we require is the approval of the fire department, so we'll include that, but understand that you're going to have to speak to and get the fire official on board with the development. So that'll be a condition which will allow his review and input into the development. We have the issue that the board does have to resolve. This is it is an issue for the board, which is the issue of the contribution for off-track improvements. So what the applicant has said, and I haven't frankly heard any contrary testimony, but we can certainly discuss it, is that there is no need for any off-track improvements, at least the type that we're talking about. There is no need for off-track drainage improvements, and there is no need for off-track sanitary sewer improvements, and therefore the applicant shouldn't be required to contribute to off-track improvements because the development is not going to cause any off-track improvements to be required. So you need to decide whether you're going to accept that or not. And if so, how any contribution would be determined. The applicant has agreed, and again, this is going to be something that I'll include in the developer's agreement provisions, but the applicant has agreed to provide handicap ramps at the Woodmont Way intersection and also at the, I believe at Pearl Street intersection, although they may already be shown there, and that the entire intersection is supposed to be textured pavement. My indicates say new and Pearl and also center and new, and that those improvements or the design of those improvements will be subject to the review and approval of the planner.
Bob, that one is in our review memos.
Okay. All right, the applicant or the applicant's traffic engineer agreed that he would submit his traffic study, or I'm not sure that we want to call it traffic study because I think that connotes something special. Let's say his report to our professionals, the planner and the engineer, for their review and approval. Another item there's only a couple that the board has to decide, is there was a signage issue on Pearl Street. I know there was some discussion, but I don't know that there was any resolution as to whether the board wanted to require any signage. I think, from what I gathered, that the inclination was no because of the appearance and the fact that people are familiar with the street and so forth, but if there's any desire to require any signage, we'd have to put that in as a condition. I sort of covered this in the other one, maybe I've duplicated myself, but the final design of the two intersections, that is the New and Pearl and New and Center Street, Center Woodmont Way intersections are going to be subject to the review and approval of the planner and the engineer. The applicant will comply with the review letter of the borough's affordable housing consultant with the caveat that the applicant will work with the affordable housing consultant in terms of the retention of a properly certified / licensed person to administer the affordable housing component. Construction phasing, we talked about, that will be part of the developer's agreement. With respect to the bathroom issue, the applicant agrees that if feasible, the applicant will incorporate a shared bathroom or bathrooms into the retail space, which would be accessible to the public. I would just note, by the way, that someone suggested that it didn't have to be a fully accessible bathroom. If you have a public bathroom, it's got to be fully accessible, so there's no halfway measures with respect to bathrooms. There will be a condition with respect to the design standards for the public space. Jim is going to provide me with that memo, which he just reviewed with the applicant, but I don't have those details, but they'll be included in the resolution. The ground floor apartment issue I will work on. I understand what it is that everybody has agreed to and what the board wants. Generally, what we're going to say is that the ground floor apartments in the buildings that front on New Street up until the corner of Lake, and I think as Jim indicated, that as they turn the corner, should be designed. We're not going to require the applicant to put in any type of commercial space, but should be designed to be flexible so that they can become in the future retail or live-work spaces, and that it's understood that any of those ground floor apartments can be converted to a retail or commercial use, which is a permitted use in that zone or in that PUCD. I think we should say in the zone, without the need for approval by the board, as long as there is no, well, let's just say without need for further approval by the board. Those are the conditions and issues, and there's just those two, I think, the questions that you need to decide. The one, the off-track issue, and the other one being the signage issue.
There was one other minor thing that the applicant said they would try to accommodate, which was to see if there was a way to incorporate some landscape element within the wall structure of the garage.
In the garage structure?
Yes.
That's the one, yeah.
On the face
In
of it.
front of the
On
garage.
the piazza,
On the face.
yeah, on the face of it. We'll
Right.
see.
Or a Trump boy.
Okay, so let's discuss that then.
Well, I have one question for Lisa. Lisa, do you feel that the sanitary sewer system is going to be adequate for the development?
I did ask in my report for the demand for the sanitary sewer and capacity of the existing sewer, which they agreed to provide. Tom Harretts from you all know the city engineer, the borough engineer, spoke to Fred Hall and said that this is on the upstream end of the system and that it should be adequate, and they had that discussion, and were confident that it was adequate, but I still want to get that information from the applicant.
Okay, and the applicant has agreed to that?
Yes.
Okay. I just.
Okay, so maybe what we should say then is that provided that the information on the demand is supplied to and approved of by the engineer, that that no sanitary sewer improvements are required, that there won't be any off-track improvements, and therefore there's not any contribution. If, in fact, there is a determination that some sanitary sewer improvement is required, we'll leave that for negotiation between the borough and the applicant with respect to the developer's agreement.
That also goes for water demand, too.
Okay?
Were there any other, in either of your memos, forgive me for not remembering all of the details, was there any other off-track improvements other than these that we're discussing that you feel were not met or should be met, or were those the only two?
No, that about covered it, other than the overhead wires that Jim had
Where were we at
discussed
with the
earlier.
paving and the mill, where did we leave the?
The applicant agreed, based on the condition, to revisit that, I believe, did he not?
Yeah, the agreement was that if it was, and somehow I managed to not mention that one, the agreement was that if the engineer determines at the conclusion of the construction that the street requires milling, paving, reconstruction as a result of the development and the work, that the balance of New Street would be milled and paved, and whatever sub-base or whatever needed.
Curb to curb, yes.
Right.
Do both of you feel that with the condition that was written about developing, working with Woodmont, Mr. Santola, the intersections would allow us for doing the bump outs and stuff like that we talked about?
It's covered in my
Okay,
memo.
I
so
just want to make sure.
They've agreed to it.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yep.
Mr. Renaud, also, as part of the board's determination tonight, if they look favorably upon our application, we'll need them to make a finding under the RSIS that we meet the standard, the parking standard under 521 4.14 C, subsection C and E, had to do with the flexible parking.
Yeah, I heard that request. I mean, I don't have a problem with it if the board doesn't. I question whether the standards are applicable, so I don't really have a problem with doing, with the finding that probably would be prudent for the board to make that finding anyway, that the parking is adequate for the development based on the mixed-use aspect of it, based on the transit-oriented development aspect of it, and based on the local conditions, which is also a standard that the residential site improvement standards allows the board to make a determination. And actually, the determination is not only that you vary from what would otherwise be the standard, but in essence, it permits the board to determine what the standard is. So you can determine that the parking which has been provided meets the requirements of the residential site improvement standards. And we'll, since council has mentioned that, we'll include that in the relief which is being requested, rather than making that a condition. In other words, I'll add that to the site plan conditional use and subdivision approval.
Thank you.
Okay.
On relief, there was one other item I just wanted to clarify. There's two signs at the corner of Woodmont Way, residential signs, that are noted in the application needing relief, but I'm not sure we got those on the record. Steve, the two Woodmont Way, the two
Yeah, there's just two.
small, yeah, the ordinance doesn't take,
They're defined on the plan.
they're defined on the plan and noted for
What signs?
at the corner of Woodmont Way, there's two small monument signs. The ordinance doesn't
Doesn't
anticipate
address it.
signage, it's small. And then in testimony, we had a sign proposed for the garage. that will
Oh, so that's a
probably-
waiver, you're saying?
That's a waiver.
Okay.
There'll be a sign on the parking structure to be determined that will need some waiver. It's going to need something to be creative. Maybe it says Metuchen as well. It advertises our stop on the train station to passersby, New Jersey Transit. And then lastly, the ability for banners in the piazza area, which again,
Why
the
do we need,
ordinance-
just tell me why we need waivers for these signs?
I'm just noting that they would need waivers.
What are we, what are the, what's the standard that we're waiving from, I guess?
We don't have a standard for garage signs, for parking
Okay.
structure signs.
All right.
We have business signs.
So really what we're saying is that we are going to permit signs. I'm trying to think of what we're going to permit so that we don't wind up having...
It's three classes of signs that are not covered by the ordinance. The monument signs for the lobby leasing area at the corner of Woodmont Way. They're small, discreet, they're on the plans, they were noted. The signs for the parking structure, again, not anticipated in the ordinance. We haven't had a parking structure.
So are these signs shown on the plan?
Yes, they are.
All right.
The Woodmont
So we
Way-
can grant waivers for the signs which are shown on the plans?
Woodmont Way, there's not one shown for the garage.
Okay.
And banners are not shown for the piazza area, but I think we could come up with language to cover what we're anticipating.
Okay, we'll give it a shot.
Okay, we're right at 11 o'clock. Anybody else on the board want to add anything based on Mr. Renard's comments?
Just a question on the phasing that you were talking about. Are we also going to have something in there about the phasing for the COA units? Oh, is it? Oh, okay. Then we'll put that in the developer's agreement?
Yes. In fact, actually, I should mention it, that all of that, all the affordable housing stuff is going to go in the developer's agreement, the compliance with it.
Council, or anything else?
No, just, am I correct in assuming that nobody's interested in a no outlet sign or whatever for Pearl Street?
No,
Okay.
I think it's pretty standard that most people know you can't get through the railroad tracks there.
Okay.
Cute.
Okay, I guess it's at that time. I'm pleased and excited to move this application with the conditions that we discussed. I believe that this development will be the impetus to a positive growth and will bring great improvements to the borough of Metuchen and support the residents and the businesses of our downtown. So I'm very pleased to move this application.
I'll second.
And we have a second. Sharon, can we have a voice vote, please?
Mr. Forth?
Yes.
Mrs. Bush?
Can I say something first? I'd like to thank you for your presentation, and I too am very excited about this development, about this project. It's been a long time coming for the town, and a lot of people put a lot of hard work into it. It's very clear. I would like to say I would like a bathroom. I do think it could be more than just if feasible. I think the one at the train station works really well. It's kept clean, doesn't have to be huge. It can have very defined hours. But that being said, I really look forward to a bright future and a wonderful development downtown.
Is there a yes in there?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Mrs. Clarkson? Yeah, yes, again, I just want to support the mayor's comments and Mrs. Bush's. I think this is tremendous, will have a tremendous positive impact on our town and its growth and its future. And I look forward to seeing this development in place of the 650 odd parking spaces and cement that is there now.
Very
So
good.
I'm very much in favor of it. My
Okay.
vote is yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Grossman?
Aye.
Mr. Leeper?
Aye.
Mayor Bahala?
Aye.
Councilman Wallace?
I'd just like to make a comment. I think the parking authority and the the mayor should be complimented for working this out the way it did. I think this is the beginning of a new era of Metuchen, and I look forward to it, yes.
Mr. Hirsch?
Yes.
Mr. Erickson?
Exciting times indeed, yes.
Thank you.
Congratulations, the application is approved, Godspeed, and we wish you well.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We'll address that in a minute.
We do the next one?
I think what we got to do is we got to go next.
Yeah, what's everybody's availability next Thursday? We're trying, we're discussing that now, man. As soon as you stop talking, we're going to talk about it. Board members, so we have another application, which is, the Legion, American Legion Hall, and I think it's pretty late, so the question is, do you want to carry this application to a future date, or I don't think you want to proceed at 11 o'clock, do you?
I don't think we want to proceed now. I think the prudent thing to do would be to move it to next Thursday.
Okay. How's everybody's availability look for next Thursday?
Not available.
I'm not here, so. But I'm an alternative.
Okay,
Would we have a quorum for next Thursday?
okay.
Why don't we poll everybody and see how many are available?
Jason?
No.
Kathy?
I don't think so.
No. Ellen?
Yes.
Yes. Me? Yes. You?
Me? Yes.
Yes. Yes, we got a quorum.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Alan?
we have a quorum.
Alan? Okay. No. Okay, we have a quorum.
Looks like we have 6 at
I might
least.
be able to, I'll
Yes.
see if I can.
So everybody who said yes, you better show up, okay? Otherwise, you're in big trouble. So we're going to move.
Do you have,
We just counted, did you not hear us?
okay, I didn't think
Doing
that
that
there were 6.
application, right?
Yes, Council.
Are you available?
One, two,
I'm available,
three.
my team is
Okay.
available for next Thursday. If we are to adjourn that, we'd ask that the board not require any
We're
further
gonna, I'm
notice.
going to do the announcement. I want to make sure we're going to do that.
That's the 24th, right?
Council, how do we memorialize our decision to carry this meeting?
I'm going to do that right now. Well, first of all, I guess we could, why don't we take a quick vote? Someone would move to have a special meeting next Thursday to take up this application.
I'll move the special meeting.
Second.
Okay.
You want to do it? You can do a voice vote.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay.
Okay.
Motion
All
carried.
right, so I'm going to make this announcement for the public, so please pay attention. Next Thursday, which will be the 24th of July, there will be a special meeting of the board. The American Legion Parking Authority application, which was scheduled for this evening, will be carried to that time. The meeting will commence at 7:30 or soon thereafter. There will be no further notice. The application will be heard in this room at 7:30 on July 24th.
Thank you, Council. No, I'm good. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor of adjourn? Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all.